Viker sighed with relief, thinking to himself, I am lucky to have met the Saintess. This will surely help things move along quickly. Across from him, Dolores wondered, what is this? How can someone so small and seemingly pitiful have defeated Sir Pietro and all the knights of the temple? She gazed intently at Viker, unable to take her eyes off him. In her mind, she pierced through Viker's soul. She saw a dark blackness intertwined with the red of blood, witnessed ashes resting on bleached bones. She sensed that his soul exhibited the scent of beasts, blood, oil, and steel in the whirlwind of countless emotions. Among them, there was a profound sorrow, a deep black pit lying at the very center of Viker's heart that made Dolores question, who is this person? Both remained silent, lost in their own thoughts. No one spoke another word. That night, the sky remained gray, overshadowing the slums of Saint Mecca. Amidst the dark, the church was lit. The nuns exclaimed with emotion, "Oh, you arrived, Saintess!" They erupted with joy upon seeing Dolores. A nun was sobbing, her hands clasped in prayer. Please save us from this terrible pandemic. Behind her, a line of patients lay sprawled on the floor. Dolores gasped, her hand over her mouth, exclaiming in shock, so everything Night Hound said was true. Viker didn't reply. He looked down at the dying patients, feeling a pang of guilt within him. Forgive me, but I had no choice. I had to rely on the townsfolk. He scanned the sick, silently breathing a sigh of relief. Luckily, there are no children infected, so the fear I instilled in those kids at the well is keeping them away. I guess that had an effect after all. He watched the saint kneeling beside one of the patients, thinking to himself, at least they've only just contracted the illness. I have no choice but to leave the rest to the saint. Dolores bowed her head and whispered, those poor souls. Gently, she took one patient's hand and comforted them softly. Don't worry, the boundless compassion of the divine will heal you. Dolores lowered her head again, clasping her hands as she whispered a prayer. The light of my life, the flame of my life, my sin soul. Witness these pitiful people who have gathered here. A glimmering tear welled up from Dolores' eye. The tear rolled down her cheek and splashed onto the ground, transforming into a bright, shimmering gold. Instantly, her body began to glow. The whole church lit up, brightening the dark night. The light reached the dying patients. As the light slowly faded, the red spots disappeared from the patients' bodies. Their faces regained a healthy color in an instant. The nuns gasped in amazement and admiration, tears streaming down their faces. They cried out joyfully, he's been healed. And many others echoed their sentiments. O Saint, we thank you. We are grateful. O divine savior of all. Watching from the side, Viker remained silent, observing. He thought to himself, yes, it's the power that does this. He looked at Dolores, tears filled with determination, and said, I must bring the miracle of that holy water into the forest. Dolores sat alone in her room, focused on her desk lamp, studying intently. She had been examining the slum map all night long. Dolores was lost in thought. Healing with holy power is just a temporary fix. I can't stop the number of patients from increasing. She looked at the marked spots on the map and fell silent. The rising number of patients is because there's a contaminated well somewhere in the slums. Dolores glanced at a sample of water. The solution taken from the body of an infected person showed that the incubation period was very short, and it took a long time for the patients to die. The sample was murky green and released a terrible smoke, very cruel. It caused the patients to endure pain for a long time. Dolores felt frustrated. To prevent this outbreak from spreading further, I need to purify the deepest well. If only I could condense my holy power into a drop. She imagined it, like a drop of morning dew resting on a leaf. Phew, Dolores sighed. This isn't the time for me to get distracted. I should go treat more patients. Suddenly, Dolores felt dizzy and thought to herself, am I feeling faint because I've used too much holy power? Nonetheless, Dolores was determined. She got up after a moment of calming down and stepped outside, knowing she could still help the patients feel better sooner. As soon as she walked out, Dolores encountered a hassle. The saint has arrived. In front of her stood 3 annoying noblemen. They took turns speaking, Saint, we're coming too. Please don't worry. Dolores gently asked, why have you come here? They replied, we've come to help the saint. They continued boasting, how could we let a noble lady like you be all alone in such a wretched place? We've brought 3 carts of relief supplies and donations. The people here are lucky today. Dolores listened with an impassive expression. The nobleman in front of her started to seem ridiculous and distorted. Every word they uttered was utterly filthy. We thought the folks in this slum would be sickly and emaciated, but they look pretty decent. Maybe we've given too much. We're worried that if we keep giving them handouts like this, they might become lazy. They ignored Dolores' silence as she turned to leave with Pietro. One of them said, after all, it's our duty as men to protect the young lady. We will follow the saintess. They smugly added, we think we've done pretty well. Dolores turned back to them and smiled, then I'll count on you. Just a bright smile like morning sunshine made the hearts of the three nobles feel like they were about to leap out of their chests. In the slums, a group of nobles looked pallid and exclaimed in disgust, covering their noses with their hands, "It smells terrible." They screamed when they saw patients writhing in pain, shouting, "Ah, I stepped on trash. These shoes are very expensive and they're a limited edition." Their endless cries of complaint continued, "Priests, heal me first. I'm sure I've caught something too. Get them away from me. I need to get out of here." Dollars left quietly. She glanced back and thought, "I knew this would happen. It's outrageous to bring their wicked intentions to this place. Do they really have no compassion for the sick? Truly hypocritical." Dollars thought, seeing the nuns prayerfully striving to save the sick, that selfless sacrifice and compassion were the most essential elements of God's love. Dollars stood still, gazing ahead. She was moving toward the inner room, which radiated even more negative energy. From here, things would only get worse. The critically ill patients were all inside. Both the patients and the priests were engulfed in pain. Dollars couldn't help but feel tortured. "I'm sorry for not arriving sooner." Each step she took created a glowing aura. Dollars felt as if she were gliding over water. She firmly pushed the curtain aside to enter. But when she heard someone call out, "Hurry, bring more saline solution," Dollars froze. Viker was holding a scalpel, preparing to make an incision right at the red bruise on the patient's skin. A priest behind him exclaimed, "No way, can't this just be done with holy power? How long has he been alone with the patient?" Dollars stood there in shock, blood oozing from the clean wound of the patient's body. Viker placed 2 fingers on the cut. His fingers glowed as he felt a pulse along the wound. The divine power in his fingers made the cut heal instantly, along with the persistent redness caused by infection. The priests were stunned. They whispered, "He's not just blessing the skin, he's allowing the blessing to spread into the infected area. If that's the case, we can focus on using our holy power." Dollars was surprised. She widened her eyes at the scene before her and the words of the priest beside her, thinking, "I can't believe there's a method like this." Dollars gasped. It finally dawned on her who Viker was. "Is that the night hound?" Viker was pouring powdered medicine into the mouth of the sick person. Dollars was taken aback. Incredible. He's skilled in both medicine and divine power. Viker knelt down, placing both hands on the patient's chest. Light flashed. He was sweating, but he remained deeply focused. In his mind, he thought, the divine power is a prayer from the priests that God hears. God accepts it and grants them strength. The amount of divine power depends on their sincerity towards God, and the required divine power equates to the power needed to perform a miracle. A holy power is a miracle, and each holy power can create 10 miracles. But I know how to create 10 miracles with just 1 holy power and 100 miracles with 10 holy powers. In the fall, when monsters invaded us, the priests looked at the number of dead at their feet and realized that their holy powers couldn't prevent this disaster. God had decreed that through the sincerity and determination of the priests, they could exchange their holy powers to create miracles. Let's solve this first, then face the consequences later. Let's create miracles first and think about everything else later. Even though the holy powers accumulate interest, they still use all the holy powers they had. This event became known as the high-level holy power, and it was a time when killing monsters was seen as a religious act. Even though I'm not a priest, killing a monster would still use high-level holy power. Viker gently touched the sick person's head to check. That's why someone with a soul and past karma like me can use holy power if I'm in a sacred area. Viker used his holy power to heal another person. Suddenly, he heard a child's sobs behind him. Mom. Her mother was on the verge of death from illness. Viker turned to the child and reassured her, "I will help your mom get better soon." He approached, handed the little girl a gold coin, and instructed her, "With her being sick and severely malnourished, take this to buy some food and firewood to take care of your mother." The priest suddenly gasped at this act. The priest shouted, "You can't offer material help. They'll just keep demanding more. If you do this, you'll end up giving them all your money." His words caught the attention of others in the slum. They turned to look at Viker with predatory gazes. Viker remained calm as he responded, "Why would it be endless?" The priest was confused. "The money in my pocket is limited. I can give it all to them if I want." Viker replied straightforwardly, not bothering to hide his pouch of gold coins. He bent down to look at the mother who was on the brink of death. "I'm sorry," Viker whispered. Dollars stared at him, surprised. He just said he was sorry. She was taken aback, wondering, why would this man say sorry? Dollars felt drawn to Viker. She stood frozen, watching him while her heart was in turmoil. Viker's words over a hot cup of tea lingered in her mind. Theology is a necessary process for studying humanity, so there's no other way. Dollars felt lost in thought. Could it be the same reason for me? She watched Viker's back as she poured all her limited holy power into healing as many people as she could. because he can't heal any more people, right? Dollars was entranced by the golden light radiating from Viker. He had coughed up blood from pushing himself too hard. Her heart suddenly raced. She quickly turned away and stepped outside. The 16-year-old girl, innocent and pure St. Dollars, clenched her fists, trembling uncontrollably. Her cheeks flushed as she hugged her chest, bewildered by this new feeling. Dollars' heart began to pound faster at the sight of the mysterious man before her. Meanwhile, in a hidden spot in the forest, Viker had slipped away to take a short break. He gently removed his gas mask, letting out a sigh of relief. After all, that outfit was stifling and made movement difficult. He sat on the wooden fence, slowly sipping from the water bottle he had with him. Suddenly, his gaze seemed to catch onto something. It turned out that Dolores had been standing there without him realizing. Viker quickly put his gas mask back on and coldly asked her, "What's up?" Dolores hesitated for a moment, then moved closer to him. Sitting on the wooden fence, she asked, "Can we talk for a bit?" Viker didn't refuse and replied lightly, "Sure." Dolores began, "Thank you for your help. Because of you, I was able to treat all the injured people." Viker humbly responded, "I just did what I needed to do." Hearing that, Dolores chuckled softly. "I knew you'd say that." Then she fell quiet, and it seemed like their conversation had hit a standstill. Suddenly, Dolores clenched the hem of her dress, showing a hint of insecurity as she said to Viker, "Someone like you should have been born with divine power. To be honest, I'm lucky to have been born with it, but my body, mind, and faith are weak. Why would God choose someone as fragile as me to be a saintess?" She bowed her head, her eyes filled with sadness. There are many people with strong faith, even if they weren't born with divine powers. But why did God choose to give me the title of saint? Viker's face was hidden behind a mask, making it impossible to see his expression. Still, his voice came out calm. "The reason you are struggling in pain and sin is why God has chosen you." His words left Dolores astonished. Viker continued, "The world needs a light that can shine even in the darkest and most terrible places." Dolores didn't even realize when she became captivated by him. She instinctively focused on the man in front of her. Suddenly, tears welled up in her eyes. Her small body started to tremble slightly. She looked down, trying to hide her blurred face from the tears. Her voice quivered as she asked, "Can I really become someone who can say such words?" Without a moment's hesitation, Viker replied, "The priests of the Quadus family have gathered and prayed, helping the holy water creation process succeed. A divine essence that can cleanse all those afflicted in the slums with just a drop. A concentrated drop of holy water has been created, including some that have been stored away. Its name is Plani de la Verge, the tears of the holy woman." In the sanctuary, under the warm glow of the Lord, Dolores resembled a small bird prayerfully offering her supplications. She spoke slowly, saying, "Let everyone bear witness to the only woman here, a son standing before you, me, a one who has tragically had to raise the Son of God, who has cried out night after night. My heart can't bear such overwhelming pain. Today is the most sorrowful and painful day of my life." As she finished speaking, a powerful stream of golden light appeared, weaving its way into every corner of the sanctuary. Around the holy woman's position, a magical circle emerged, centering on her. Moments later, a group of priests from the sanctuary arrived. They carefully took the box containing the 3 drops of the holy woman's tears. One of them said, "Thank you for your efforts, holy woman. We promise to keep it safe in the basement." Dolores, dressed in a light white robe, replied gently, "Thank you, my friends." She glanced out the window as if there was something important only she could handle. Around the temple, countless sculptures of goddesses were crafted, poised as if to bestow love and happiness upon anyone who gazed upon them. Under the large statue of the goddess in the center, a man in a cardinal's robe was praying with his hands clasped. Dolores approached quietly and said, "Father, I have something to report about the Red Death." He replied upon hearing this, "Come closer, my fairy, my daughter." Dolores respectfully acknowledged him and stepped closer to the man. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder, praising her. "This time you made quite a significant proposal, truly, my daughter." As Dolores looked into his eyes, she began to discern his features. It turned out he was Humbert, the cardinal of the lewd church, Humbert Lund Quo Vadis. Dolores lowered her head and replied, "You are too kind, father." Humbert then instructed his daughter, "All right, tell me what happened." Dolores began to share her thoughts. "First, I plan to use the tears of the saint we created to purify the waters flowing beneath Saint Mecca." Humbert was taken aback and immediately asked, "You found the source of the disease?" Dolores replied, "Yes, it started from an unidentified well in the slum." She began to recall the information she had gathered. The children had testified that a spirit had cursed the well. The well had become heavily contaminated, and they had found a glass vial that the criminal used to store and spread the disease. Seeing his father frowning in anger, Dolores continued, "After investigating the area, we found something suspicious." With that, she carefully opened the cloth bag she had brought along. Humbert gasped. Looking at the item inside, he asked, "Where did you find this?" Dollars answered, "At the well." At that moment, Humbert truly lost his temper. His face became fearsome. The symbol of Leviathan and the bourgeois, is it them? How could they create such an artificial plague? Immediately, the entire tiled floor of the sanctuary trembled with his rage. Humbert shouted, "How dare those vile lowlifes defile the holy?" Standing beneath the statue of the goddess, Humbert's eyes sparkled with a golden gleam. He said to Dolores, "Let's start a rebellion." Seeing that Dolores was still deep in thought, Humbert abruptly changed the subject. "That guy calls himself Night Hound. He's very suspicious." Then his expression turned fierce again. Get him captured immediately and make him reveal everything. However, Dolores mustered all her courage and said loudly, "He's innocent." Humbert stared in shock at his daughter's resolute face. He asked in astonishment, "What do you mean?" Dolores was determined to defend Viker. She explained he did everything he could to treat the injured. Thanks to him, there were no casualties. He could never be that cruel. Humbert whispered softly, "I see." This time, Dolores was taken aback. She didn't expect her father to be so easily swayed. But Humbert continued, "My daughter has never disagreed with me before, but now you're saying this." With that, he raised his arm high, the golden light shining brightly, illuminating the sky. His gaze was firm. "I will personally interrogate him." His actions left Dolores trembling with fear. She cried out in terror at her father's authority. The ground around them shook violently once again. In the distance, a golden light began to coalesce into a brilliant beam that competed with the sun in broad daylight. Inside the temple, beneath the statue of the noble goddess, Humbert's voice echoed clearly, "My daughter, it doesn't matter if you oppose me because I have sent a squad of holy knights to hunt him down." Unbeknownst to them, countless holy knights had appeared, flooding the streets. Each of them was focused, searching for any trace of Viker. A group seemed to have found something. They immediately raced towards a room in a nearby building. The heavy sound of boots on the stairs echoed rhythmically. Arriving at the door of the room, the group quickly and professionally took their positions, ready to charge in and capture whoever was inside. As the door was forcefully kicked open, the knight shouted, "You are the suspect responsible for the Red Death." However, before he could finish his sentence, everyone was stunned to realize that there was no one left in the room. The curtains at the window fluttered in the breeze, serving as evidence of how the suspect had escaped. Back in the temple, Humbert stood solemnly, praying to the goddess when suddenly a frantic monk rushed in. He shouted, "Cardinal, something bad has happened." Humbert and Dolores exchanged puzzled looks. Humbert asked, "What happened?" The monk finally paused, fear evident in his voice. "One of the saint's tears has disappeared from the basement. We don't know when it happened, but in the tightly guarded basement of the temple, where 3 jars containing the saint's tears were kept, one jar has been completely punctured, and one of the tears is gone." Dolores, upon hearing this, was equally taken aback, questioning the reason for the monk's visit. Somewhere in the Quo Vadis territory, Viker stood gazing at the serene scenery around him. He removed his mask, holding the saint's tear in his hand, and smiled softly, "Thank you." In just a flash, he was no longer visible. Somewhere, a small girl with short hair trembled as she used her bow. She was facing a huge and terrifying creature known as the Hound. The 3-headed monster showed no fear of her bow. It slowly approached her, despite a group of people behind her shooting arrows to try to drive it away. The beast remained relentless, determined to make her its prey. Confronted by the monster's terrifying presence, the little girl could only keep retreating until she felt the edge of a cliff behind her. Then she lost her footing and fell freely from the mountaintop into the deep valley below. As she crashed through layers of thick leaves, her body struck the ground with a loud thud. Her awareness began to fade, and all she could see was a small beam of light narrowing before her eyes. Looking closely, she noticed the faces of 2 strangers. They spoke in languages she couldn't understand, but instinctively, she sensed that these people were not ordinary. She had fallen into some kind of trade route. Luckily, the thick layer of leaves had cushioned her fall, and she was soon discovered by a group of merchants barely clinging to life. When she finally woke up, even though she was wearing a dirty outfit and the wound on her head was still unhealed, the poor girl struggled to hold her sword as she found herself in some kind of arena. Her opponent was a tall man with a cruel gaze, staring at her like a monster admiring its helpless prey. He quickly charged at her, his strong shoulders ready to pounce. The girl opened her eyes wide in fear, searching for any weakness in him. Sure enough, with her tiny frame, she managed to dodge his first attack and even gave him a cut on his neck. However, luck was not on her side as his grip caught her thin legs. He showed no mercy, throwing her hard against a distant wall, causing her to cough up blood in pain. From the stands, the faces of the onlookers couldn't hide their delight behind their masks. They laughed with satisfaction as they watched her suffer. The girl lay defeated on the ground, tears streaming down her face. feeling powerless as she watched her opponent reveling in his victory. But then, she remembered her strong mother, the brave members of her tribe. They came from a solid mindset, always refusing to be oppressed. The girl stood up once again, her small hand pushed against the ground, quickly creating a support for her weak body. To the surprised gazes of the surrounding nobles, she successfully rose to her feet. She tossed the sword aside, her hand brushing over the soil as if performing some sacred ritual. Suddenly, she stood tall, her hand caressing her face. The streaks of dirt quickly covered her youthful features. At that moment, her eyes became more determined than ever. She loathed the nobles who looked down on the lives of others. She hated the days spent in prison behind bars, living in a state of limbo, devoid of vitality. During those moments, she tried to remember her mother, to think of her extended family, hoping those memories would give her a little more strength to carry on. Then one day, she couldn't tell how many years had passed. The girl from before had become a beautiful young woman, yet she still lay exhausted in her iron cage. The sound of glass shattered the silence, waking the girl from her daze. When she finally woke up, Ayan found herself facing a strange young man with red eyes. It seemed that for the first time in all those years, she was seeing color again in her dark life. This time, she could also view the familiar language of her tribe. The young man said, "Go," and broke the iron cage that had surrounded her for so many years. Suddenly, Ayan opened her eyes wide. It turned out to be a memory of her painful childhood. At the same time, it was the first time she met Viker after she regained consciousness. Aquila immediately asked, "My daughter, did you have a nightmare?" Ayan looked up, still in a daze. Her mother gently stroked her head, saying, "While you were sleeping, you kept calling for Viker." Ayan didn't respond right away. She felt extremely uncomfortable in her body. Breathing heavily, she said, "Mom, the pain feels even worse than before. My chest hurts and my whole body feels like it's on fire. It feels like my heart is being dried up. Am I going through a red death?" She whispered, "I can't take it anymore. It hurts so much that I regret ever being born." Aquila gently held her daughter's hand, watching as Ayan's pain brought tears to her eyes. She spoke softly, "My dear, a long time ago, your father and I buried a seed in the ground." She paused, reminiscing. "Your father planted that seed, and your mother watered it every day. Soon enough, the seed sprouted. After a few months, it grew into a strong and beautiful flower." Ayan looked up at her mother, silently listening to the story. "Then we cut that flower and extracted its sap to enjoy together. We felt so happy and carefree." After a moment, Aquila continued, "That's why you were born." In Aquila's memory, that flower had an eerie green color, a blend of the green of leaves and the blue of the sky. But it also had a way of luring people in and causing them to lose themselves. She looked at Ayan and said, "Your father committed a crime and your grandfather sentenced him to death." With that, she turned her attention back to Ayan, adding, "Your body is gradually deteriorating. Life will throw many challenges your way. You just need to live through it." She stroked Ayan's forehead tenderly and said, "Just hang on a little longer. Viker will return with a way to heal you." Ayan didn't quite believe that. With tears in her eyes, she said softly, "Mom, you don't need to comfort me. He will come back." She remembered that day, the day Viker left, his footprints deeply imprinted in the forest floor. It was pouring rain, as if the sky understood her sorrow. Suddenly, a voice shattered the sad scene in the room. "He's back. Viker. Viker has returned with medicine." Hearing this, Aquila smiled and said, "See, I told you, my daughter." But before she could finish her sentence, Ayan, who had just been weakly resting on her lap, disappeared. She dashed outside with all her strength. Aquila frowned, wondering, isn't she supposed to be suffering from the Red Death? Ayan didn't slow down at all. The distance from the chief's tent to the outside wasn't far, yet it gave her time to think of everything. Viker had said, "I was so scared back then." She recalled her first encounter with Madame Eight Legs, when that huge monster charged in, wreaking havoc. While everyone else panicked and fled, he was the only one who stood his ground, willing to sacrifice himself so others could find a way to survive. The resilient image of him from that day was etched deep in her mind. Because he showed her a bright way to face her fears, she was able to rise up. Back then, Viker couldn't defeat Madame Eight Legs. He was hit with a blow that left him severely injured and unconscious. Seizing the opportunity, Ayan quickly tied a rope around his neck and pulled him hard, both of them pushing through the difficulties to sprint back to the tribe. Now, she had made it to the spot, standing with the group. She saw Viker, who looked more mature, but the feeling he gave off was just as she remembered from that day. When Viker noticed her arrival, he cheerfully asked, "You're here." Seeing Ayan still out of breath, he continued, "I heard some warriors say you were facing the Red Death." Before he could finish, Ayan rushed into his arms, embracing the figure she had longed for. Viker was caught off guard, and they both ended up tumbling to the ground. Anne sighed, "Ayan, if I hadn't been using mana, my back would have broken by now. Aren't you going through the Red Death?" Aeon wrapped her arms tightly around him, ignoring the stares from countless people in the tribe. I didn't know. When I heard you were back, my body felt so much lighter. Viker breathed a sigh of relief. So that means you're okay? You're pretending, right? Yeah. In Aeon's mind, she didn't hear him say anything. She only felt his heart beating wildly next to hers. She smiled happily. Viker, welcome back. Viker also smiled with happiness, his eyes brightening as he replied, I'm back now. As night fell over the forest, the healing process began in the Black Tribe. He slowly opened the bag on his back, revealing a shimmering golden light that illuminated Viker's serious and respectful face. He looked at Hubble lying weakly in front of him, covered in red marks, her sweat pouring out endlessly. The little girl was facing a terrifying, prolonged pain. Viker opened the bag and took out a jar, and a golden light instantly shone, illuminating Amabel's contorted face. Moments later, Avin was overjoyed. He even cried as he looked at the miracle before him. The terrifying red spots on his sister's body had completely disappeared. He exclaimed in surprise, the red spots on a hole. As he spoke, the tribe's people began to stir with excitement. The light radiating from what Viker had brought was so powerful that the deadly red had vanished. Viker had truly cured this disease. It was amazing. While the crowd cheered for what they considered a miracle, Viker asked, Aeon, how many more patients do I have? She looked at Viker and replied, 30 people, including a hole. Viker maintained his cold demeanor and continued, what about the other tribes? Aeon responded, the situation is dire. There are many other tribes on the brink of annihilation. After gathering this information, Viker quickly organized himself and instructed Aeon, so that's about 10,000 people. Tell the other tribes to gather their patience. Aeon was taken aback and asked, what about the other clans? Do you really have that much antidote? Viker replied calmly, yeah, so don't worry. Use this opportunity to show off in front of the other clans. The villagers in the tribe felt even more excited. The other clans? Viker, you're amazing. Suddenly, Viker brought up another topic. He recalled the monstrous creature that had threatened their tribe. That swamp monster, its name was Ka, right? On my way here, I kill it, so you can use its remains for food. Once again, Viker left everyone astonished, and they couldn't help but exclaim, that's incredible. His skills are far beyond ours. Viker calmly listened to their praise and said, there's not much time left. Tell the other clans to gather around the river basin. By midnight, as the moon hung high in the sky, casting a shimmering silver glow over the river, countless tribes quickly assembled around it. With Viker at the center, they struggled to contain their excitement as he slowly took out a vial containing the tears of a goddess. Viker slowly opened the lid and poured the golden liquid into the river. Suddenly, the water began to ripple more intensely. A brilliant golden light flickered across the surface. Instantly, the light drifted downstream with the current. The entire winding river through the forest was enveloped in a powerful golden glow. Once the water had settled, Viker turned to the people behind him and said, all you need to do is drink this water. The members of the other tribe were still skeptical, but faced with the fading lives of their kin, they chose to trust him. Gradually, more and more patients were helped to drink the river water. As the golden liquid was poured down their throats, it was as if they were fish returning to water. The group of weak and sickly individuals instantly began to smile, feeling as vibrant as if they had never suffered from the deadly illness. They looked around in amazement, saying, I feel so light, the red death has vanished, I'm alive again. At that moment, Viker felt reassured and turned to Aquila, saying, from the river basin, everything is being cleansed. The plague will soon come to an end. Hearing this, she happily made a decision. Viker, I should appoint you as our tribe's shaman. Surprisingly, Viker immediately declined the title. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed from the surrounding silence. A tall, strong man, who seemed to be a respected figure from another tribe, stomped his foot on the forest floor. His gaze was fixed intensely on Viker. He shouted, people of the deep woods, answer me. Who is the hero that has cleansed the forest? Instantly, a chorus of tribes joined in, calling out Viker's name. Another person added a question. Who saved our entire family? Who brought light to the deep woods? A series of questions followed, all with the same answer, Viker. That night, the forest was filled with the sounds echoing his name. Viker's thoughts turned inward. The wicked deeds of the deadly Poison clan have turned into a fortunate situation. The Baskerville clan has taken the lead to conquer Mount Leru Eleno. The enemies of the Baskerville clan are the indigenous people of Mount Leru Eleno. If I can persuade and repay them, it might be possible to unite against the entire Baskerville clan. Thinking of this, Viker revealed a cunning expression. I can use this chance to deal a huge blow to Hugo. On the other side, Aquila couldn't hold back any longer and started cheering. Starting today, the festival will commence. Get ready for an extravagant celebration. Viker's shadow appeared behind her. He whispered before that, I have one more thing to do. Aquila and Aeon exchanged puzzled looks. But Viker quickly revealed, don't we need to find out who poisoned the forest? Somewhere shrouded in darkness, malicious thoughts kept arising. It's been a while. Everyone must be infected by now. I won't negotiate with those drug-addicted royals. It's all that damn noble's fault. In the moment of everyone's despair, I will solve the plague with an antidote. At this point, the face of an old man gradually emerged, half illuminated. He thought to himself that his clan had to respect and honor him. I know that letting a whole get infected is a good idea. It turned out that this was the peculiar shaman of the Black Tribe. A human revealed a wicked smile. No one would suspect him of poisoning his own grandmother. He withdrew his twisted expression and slowly approached the cave entrance, thinking to himself, this is truly a perfect plan. However, when he peeked outside, he saw everyone seemingly enjoying their daily lives. This left him utterly confused. Could it be? Looking closer, a human's confusion deepened. They all seemed to be healthy. Surely, before the ritual began, they would be on the brink of death from the red sickness. He hid behind a tree, watching his little granddaughter, who should have been dying from the red sickness, now joyfully playing as if nothing was wrong. A human hurried toward the river, his mind racing with panic. What in the world is going on? This can't be real. When he looked down at the river, his disbelief grew even stronger. How can the fish in the river still be alive? Has the river been purified? Not only that, but the water is clearer than before. A human clutched his head, unable to comprehend. Suddenly, Viker appeared behind him. With a cold voice, he asked, the river water is clearer now than before. Isn't it, shaman? A human jumped back in shock, shouting, you, worthless noble. In his mind, he thought, when did that brat show up? Then he noticed something behind him. Unbeknownst to him, a crowd of the black people had gathered, their expressions dark as they stared at him. The old man gave him a confused look. The more he studied their faces, the more he felt something was off. As he absorbed a human's expression, Viker thought, the one who brought that death into the forest, just as I suspected, is him, a human. He recalled memories from the past, a rumor about barbarians in this forest. Before he rewound time, there had been stories about an old man living in the woods, known for his notorious deeds. It was a horrifying tale about an elder who spread a contagious disease throughout his own tribe, driven by his ambition to become a hero. In the end, he was unable to cure the plague and nearly wiped out his entire tribe. Viker recalled the terror of the plague at that time and the pain-twisted faces of countless barbarians. He thought, so that's him, a human. However, a human now maintained a calm demeanor. In his mind, he wondered, wait, how does he know? But outwardly, he remained friendly and said, are people here to greet this old shaman? Suddenly, Aquila appeared from a distance. When he saw her, he heard Aquila ask, have you finished your work, shaman? A human continued to play along, saying, of course, the plague will soon be eradicated. Aquila continued, I heard that because of the Red Death, the tribes declared war on each other in this kingdom. The cause of this disease turned out to be artificial and spread everywhere. Aquila stared at him and asked, but isn't it strange? Between the royal family and the deep forest, I really don't know how this infectious disease spread. A human started to sweat and replied, how would I know? I came here just to perform the rituals to help the tribe fully recover. The old man had just finished speaking when he heard Aquila's cold questioning tone. So why are you out here and not in the village? Suddenly, she turned to Viker and said, Viker, just as you said, a human really has arrived at the river basin. A human looked at the two, puzzled, and then heard Aquila continue, Viker, let's see if your next guest is correct. He couldn't help but ask, what are you talking about? At that moment, Aquila recalled the memory from last night. Viker had told her, a human wants to use this situation to become the hero of the tribe, so he will definitely keep it, the antidote for the Red Death. Thinking about this made her face grow frightening and her voice turned dark as she ordered a human. I want to see what's in your bag. Somewhere in the Aeon forest, Aeon asked in confusion, you want to know about a human's background? Viker replied, yes, if I know him better, it will help. Aeon gradually remembered that a human was not a native black person. His origins were not disclosed, but long ago, he was a slave of a shaman and came to black. However, he killed the shaman who intended to rebel. After killing him, he took his power. Doing his contribution in stopping the rebellion, he was promoted from a slave to a shaman. She recalled the rumors about him and continued after that. To adapt to life in black, I heard he had to do everything, including cleaning up feces and urine. He did all the dirty work in the village. He was even used as bait to hunt dangerous game. However, thinking about the current human, Aeon couldn't help but exclaim, but now he is recognized as a member of the tribe, and as he aged, his hair has started to turn silver. Viker understood this too. He thought to himself, now that he's older, does he want all the privileges he didn't have when he was young? Then he looked over at a human and Aquila, realizing, so he's trying to overstep the authority of the chieftain and aims to take control of the entire forest. At that moment, Aquila was becoming increasingly impatient. She coldly asked, "What are you doing, a human?" Then she reached out her hand toward him and said, "Show me your bag right now." Hearing this, a human swallowed hard, beads of sweat streaming down his face. He quickly reached into his bag and replied, "Yes, ma'am. This is the flower I've saved up for after the ceremony." Suddenly, his hand trembled, and the bag fell into the cold river. A human pretended to gasp, then stared blankly as the bag truly fell into the water, watching the white powder gradually dissolve. He shouted, "This old man's hands are shaking too much, so I accidentally dropped it in the river." Seeing this, Aquila held her forehead in frustration and said, "You guessed right." Her words puzzled him, but a human quickly understood the situation. He threw the bag into the river just like you said. At that moment, Viker spoke up. "However, we cannot check what's inside a human's bag by that method." At that moment, a human shouted, "I have the antidote. So you think I'm the one who spread the poison throughout the entire forest?" He suddenly turned towards Aquila and accused, "Tribal chief, you should punish that wicked man. He has slandered me," and with the pride of a shaman. Aquila calmly responded, "Yes, you cannot defame someone without evidence." Upon hearing her words, the man's face lit up with joy. "Well, since you claim you're innocent, I will help you protect your honor and dignity." Hearing this, he couldn't help but smirk. Right. No matter how high-ranking you are, if there's no evidence, no one can touch me. Just then, Aquila suddenly called out, "I demand we hold an Iliad." At this, the man's eyes widened in shock. He knew that an Iliad was a resolution for when there was a disagreement that couldn't be solved. The Black Tribe would side with the winner of the Iliad, as the loser wouldn't have the capability to lead. At that moment, a Hun spoke up. He looked at his grandfather and said, "You always say that tradition is very important." His expression gradually became serious. "Iliad is the tradition of black. Show us how you will defend our tradition," he said. At that moment, a human became furious. He thought to himself, "That pathetic bastard." But in the end, he looked at Viker and said, "All right, 4 days from today, on the night of the full moon, I will officially propose an Iliad duel." However, Viker unexpectedly stepped closer and shouted, "4 days my ass. The one who receives the request to hold an Iliad gets to decide when it happens. That's how the tradition works." Deep down, he thought, to be honest, all this evidence and validation are meaningless, a human, because putting you in a situation where you have to engage in an Iliad duel has been entirely part of my plan. He revealed a bloodthirsty look and stared at a human, saying, "Let's do it right now." As the sunset began to blanket the hill at the burial site of the ancestors of the Black Tribe, Aquila's voice echoed, "The Iliad duel begins right now." Countless warriors of black stood nearby, watching closely. They were also the guards ensuring that the competition proceeded smoothly. The Iliad would take place within a circle formed by the warriors. Those warriors were ready to execute any coward who attempted to escape the circle. At that moment, Aquila pointed to the mountain behind her. She shouted, "Behind me is the mountain of warriors where our ancestors rest. Because our ancestors are watching, I will not forgive any wrongdoing." Viker remained quiet, hiding in a corner of the forest, listening to Aquila's words. "Our ancestors will determine what is right and what is wrong. They will choose the winner, a black warrior. So prove that you are worthy." A human readied his bow, waiting for her to finish speaking before charging into battle. Meanwhile, Ayan and the other archers in the distance cheered Viker, "Take them out in one blow." Their loud encouragement reached a human's ears, filling him with jealousy. Why is it that those kids don't have anyone on their side? Finishing his words, the old man extended his bleeding finger away, letting drops of blood soak into the ground. "When I win, they will fall silent, because weapons aren't the only thing I can use in this battle. Iliad." As the blood seeped into the earth, a decayed skeleton suddenly rose. Soon after, he had gathered 3 undead bodies and commanded, "Watch my blind spots and let me know when you see him." With that, a human revealed a victorious look. He thought to himself, "For someone who's been here only 2 years, this is completely impossible. You can't stand against me. Someone who spent 7 years at this forest, you can't know the terrain better than I do." As he pondered, "Once you show yourself, I'll shoot you immediately." Viker hung upside down from a branch, staring intently at him. He silently marveled at his skill Silent Heal gained after defeating the master of the swamp, a Wushu ability that allowed the user to target quietly, sense vulnerabilities in prey, and dampen surrounding sounds. This was excellent for assassination. He looked at the horde of zombies continuously searching around him and said, "Human, it seems like your shaman title isn't just a coincidence. The way you control these risen corpses suggests you come from Rococo, a tribe of shamans." However, noticing that they were too busy searching for him and completely missing the threat right above them, he scoffed. "That won't change anything. With that thought, Viker quickly leaped to the ground, slipping between 3 zombies without attracting any attention. When he decisively took down all 3 of them, a human was still focused on the opposite direction, looking for Viker's silhouette. The old man chuckled softly. That kid must be scared and doesn't dare to face me. Before he could finish his sentence, a chilling presence suddenly emerged behind him. In an instant, a sword pierced through his chest. A human's eyes widened in shock, confusion washing over him as he thought, when did I stop hearing any noise from him, or even the rustling of leaves? His heavy body fell onto the cold ground, and behind him stood Viker, shaking the blood off his sword. He coldly looked down at the gasping old man, retracting his blade. From a distance, Anne happily ran towards him. The group of people turned to watch, amazed. The winner had been decided in an instant. This was because the ancestors determined that what a human said was not trustworthy. A human lay there weakly, watching the joyful scene of the others in the tribe. He felt an unwillingness, a pain so intense that it felt like his wounds were on fire. I don't want to die. Through his bloodshot eyes, he stared at Aquila, who had survived among the black tribe. I have endured a shameful past. This outcome is so unfair. Why can't I have what he has? His hands moved restlessly. A human used his last bit of strength to spread hatred. I will not forgive him. That bastard took away what was rightfully mine. Those black scoundrels have disrespected me. The entire Rococo tribe has abandoned me too. All of them. On this side, the crowd remained unaware of his unusual behavior. Viker turned to Ahan and asked, Ahan, what do you think about ending all this yourself? However, Ahan turned away and refused. Viker continued to speak. If we leave him there, he'll only continue to suffer. Ahan's eyes suddenly filled with anger. I nearly lost Oval because of that bloody death. Even though he is my grandfather, I will not forgive him. Looking at a human's body drenched in blood, Ahan continued, a coward deserves to suffer. He is not worthy of pity. At this point, a human's eyes widened in shock. At the same time, he had completed the final touch on his magic circle. From a distance, a coffin began to emit a glowing purple light that vibrated continuously. With a loud sound, the lid of the coffin flew open. The purple light burst out, illuminating the entire area instantly. On the mountaintop, where the Iliad event had just finished, a strange phenomenon began to appear in the sky for the first time. Clouds spun in shades of purple, and the mountain released strange plumes of smoke. Everyone watched in amazement, unable to believe it, and one person asked, What? There's a very concerning energy coming from the tomb. Ahan's eyes widened in shock. He saw a human, who was supposed to be dead, slowly rising to his feet. Ahan's gaze showed something unsettling. Viker quickly turned to see what was happening and gasped, No way, I stabbed him in the lung. Others began to notice too. One person couldn't help but speculate, a human. Don't tell me this is all because of him. Does he dare to disturb the tomb? Aren't you afraid of your ancestors' wrath? A human stood up slowly, a creepy smile spreading across his face as he replied, Ancestors, huh? His expression became clearer and a human's eyes had completely changed. A deadly purple swirl filled his pupils, and he murmured to himself, Should I be afraid of my ancestors? A human's face turned terrifying. In the distance, a strange purple light flickered ominously. He asked, So, you think someone will let the ancestors decide? Suddenly, a woman's figure appeared in the distance, holding a bow and arrow. A human continued, Well then, it's time to evaluate things with confidence. As the mist began to clear, the woman's face became visible. It turned out she was just a zombie he had animated with dark magic. Ayan jolted and looked up at the woman high above. Is she an ancestor? He asked. Viker was also taken aback. He came here and used a resurrection spell on a black ancestor. A shaman like a human couldn't pull that off. As he examined a human's condition closely, Viker speculated, did he turn himself into a zombie? A human raised his hand slightly, and instantly, a horde of zombies appeared. Do you think I would dare perform a shamanistic ritual among the black without any tricks up my sleeve? It's too early for surprises. He considered the scene across the mountain. There's not just one grave on this mountain. He were best to fight against the ancestor. With that, he quickly climbed onto the pile of zombies, riding them away. Behind him, Ahan raised his bow, but he couldn't hit a human. He shouted, How can you be so cowardly? Suddenly, from a distance, an arrow shot through the air like lightning, aiming straight for Ahan. It turned out that she was the woman known as the ancestor of the black tribe. At the same time, an arrow flew through the air carrying a tremendous force aimed directly at her. That was the arrow from Aquila. She shouted, We're getting ready to fight. These are just puppets of a human. We'll deal with them, and then apologize to our ancestors, putting survival first. Immediately, a bloody battle broke out. Countless skilled black tribespeople joined in. However, facing a pain-free undead, the black found it very challenging to resist. The undead kept advancing, only to have Aquila's arrows blast their heads off one by one. Seeing her fight like this left everyone in awe. One arrow, one undead. She took down these high-level butchers with just a single shot. This was the Night Huntress Aquila. The rumors that she protected the forest from the Empire were not just rumors. Seeing this, he called out to Ayan, "If Chief Aquila is here, we'll be fine. Follow me, Ayan. Let's hurry and chase after a human." Deep in the forest, a human rode on the back of a zombie, constantly sneering, "You will regret chasing after me, you miserable wretches." Then, he suddenly commanded one of the undead, I need you to handle this." Seeing the zombie respond to his command and quickly leave, a human thought to himself, "Even though I have resurrected them, I still have to be cautious as long as Aquila is around. She is the strongest chieftain in history, a genius." He then chuckled to himself, "A genius, huh? No matter how brilliant she is, she won't be able to do anything." Meanwhile, Viker and Ayan had been hiding behind a tree for quite some time. Ayan couldn't hold back and said, "He's over there." It turns out they found the place where a human cast his spell. Viker couldn't help but wonder, he hid in a spot with these stunted trees. Why would he cast a spell here? Ayan, unable to contain himself, raised his bow and declared, "I can't let him get away with these suspicious activities any longer. I'm going to kill him." However, just as the arrow flew toward a human, he finished his spell. A hand effortlessly caught the arrow. Viker and Ayan were utterly astonished to see this. A human's voice echoed, "I've succeeded in summoning it. Legend says it sleeps deep within the jungle." As he finished speaking, another skeleton began to rise. "With all my excitement, I'm the only one who discovered you." The skeleton's hair started to grow long again. It knelt on the ground while a human's voice resonated, "Divine Archer, Adonis." Ayan was taken aback. No way is it really Adonis. Viker beside her was equally shocked. The legendary archer of the Black Tribe, Adonis. Suddenly, the undead drew back its bow, aiming straight at the two of them. Viker tried to block the arrow, but it still pushed him back several feet. When he managed to deflect it away, it caused a devastating explosion behind him. Viker stared in disbelief at the destruction it caused. An aura arrow, I dodged it, but the damage. He then turned his attention to Ayan behind him. She had unfortunately been hit in the thigh by the arrow. She grimaced and said, "My leg feels like it's on fire." Viker quickly guessed it must be the poison from Adonis' arrow, right? That means the legend about him fighting that monster is true. The arrow he's using is made from the remains of Madame Eight Legs. Adonis is continuously shooting, and the area of effect spreads all over the forest. Ayan noticed him clutching his arm and worriedly asked, "Viker, don't protect me anymore. Just run. Leave me here." A human interjected, his eyes filled with menace. "You disgusting bastards. Do you think I'll let either of you live?" He then commanded, "Adonis, kill him." Adonis, now in the form of a zombie, obeyed the order and aimed his bow straight at the two of them. The speed of the arrow was so fast that Viker and Ayan couldn't evade it. Fortunately, a hand suddenly appeared, gripping the arrow that was flying toward them. Much to a human's and Adonis' astonishment, even Viker and Ayan were taken by surprise at the appearance of this person. The owner of the hand gradually became visible. It was Aquila. She forcefully snapped the arrow in half. The cold tone called a human. "Shall we talk?" Aquila ran up and stood in front of the two. Ayan was very surprised to see her mother here. She quickly called out, "Mom." Aquila then spoke. "I came here because I sensed a powerful energy, but luckily I arrived in time." A human was behind them and felt immense fear upon seeing her. His hair stood on end and sweat dripped down his forehead. He stammered, seemingly in disbelief, "Aquila." Aquila's hand, which she used to grab the arrow, was bleeding. Seeing this, Ayan anxiously said, "Ma, that arrow is poison. You need to get treated right away." Aquila looked at her bloody hand and calmly replied, "Poison." With that, she firmly grasped her injured hand. Blood from her palm seeped out, changing from black to the bright red of regular blood. Viker, watching from the side, was astounded and thought to himself, she blew up the energy inside her body to expel the poison and the corrupted blood. How can someone do that? Right after that, Aquila turned to the side, her face serious, and called out the human's name loudly. He, his whole body trembling, still tried to steady himself to speak. "Everything has come to this because you've pushed me to the edge." Aquila didn't pay attention to his excuses. She said, "I don't care about your betrayal. Just answer my question." A human was taken aback and replied, "What is it?" Aquila looked at him and asked, "Is that person really Divine Archer Adonis?" Upon hearing this, a human smiled, looking both astonished and fearful, and responded, "Yes, the legendary Archer Adonis is someone you wouldn't dare confront." She merely smiled lightly at this, then turned to Ayan and Viker, saying, "You two did very well. Now stay behind me." Then she turned back, still smiling, and continued, "Divine Archer Adonis, it is indeed an honor to meet you, even under these circumstances. Let's see who the strongest warrior truly is. Both stood still, calmly sizing up their opponent, ready for what was to come. Out of nowhere, Aquila moved swiftly. She was the first to attack. She charged at Adonis like lightning, drew her bow, and released a powerful flurry of arrows. Adonis quickly dodged every single arrow. His reflexes were sharp and agile. He immediately counterattacked. The arrows he shot were so powerful that the ground around them shattered. Aquila was not one to be outdone. She skillfully evaded all of his arrows. At that moment, both engaged in fierce combat. They moved at incredible speeds. The only thing visible was the bursts of light that filled the air as they raced by. Viker was carrying Aeon on his back, trying to get her to a safer place. He glanced back at the two fighters, thinking, this is a battle between master practitioners of energy. It's truly a rare sight in these chaotic times. Despite her injury to her thigh, Aeon was worried and called out, Ma. Old Human stood to the side, observing the fight by focusing one eye on a tree. He muttered as he watched, indeed, Aquila the Night Fox is not easily matched against Lord Adonis. Then he laughed loudly and shouted, however, you can never defeat Lord Adonis. He is already dead. He can wield the dark powers of hell. You know how destructive a fired arrow can be, right? On the other side, Aquila was gradually losing ground. She thought to herself, fighting from a distance puts me at a disadvantage. His speed, strength, and agility. He's a flawless marksman, but he's missing something very important. It seemed she had spotted a weakness in Adonis and seized the moment. She drew her bow and aimed straight at him, firing two arrows that collided and exploded in a massive blast. Smoke and debris filled the air, obscuring all visibility. Taking advantage of this, Aquila quickly moved in. She swung her leg to kick Adonis, but he quickly dodged out of the way. Then he swung his knife. With just one swipe, he chopped down all the trees around him. Fortunately, Aquila managed to evade just in time. She swiftly pulled out the knife she had tucked at her hip and threw it toward Adonis, making his knife drop to the ground. The next moment, she kicked Adonis' leg hard, making him drop to his knees, his eyes blazing with fury. Seizing this opportunity, she poured all her strength into the arrow and shot it. The arrow lit up the sky, a bright beam shooting upwards into the vast expanse. After releasing the arrow, she looked up to see part of Adonis' body had been destroyed. At that moment, she spoke, Great Ancestor, is it true that you do not wish to fight because you have actually died? Or is it that you want to avoid harming your descendant? Either way, all I can do is free you from your current predicament. As she spoke, she readied her bow again, aiming at Adonis, and channeled her strength into another shot. The arrow flew straight toward him, but this time he didn't dodge. It stood still. This caught Aquila by surprise. As the arrow drew near, Adonis caught it and snapped it in half. The part of his body that had been destroyed started to regenerate. A terrifying image of a demon clung to Adonis, slowly taking over his form. Suddenly, a voice rang out, he has refused the soul-binding spell. Truly, a legend indeed. Suddenly, a voice rang out, I won't forgive half-hearted efforts like that, Adonis. Now, you must fight with all your strength until every threat to me is dead. This voice belonged to a human, who stood grinning maliciously. Aquila was furious and shouted, a human. The demon had completely taken control of Adonis' body, tilting his head back and letting out chilling screams. At that moment, Aquila realized he could no longer think of him as Adonis. The demon in Adonis' form looked incredibly fierce, as if it could devour anyone in its path. It seemed that the battle between the two, fueled by the demon's power, had drawn the attention of other monsters lurking in the forest. Massive creatures slowly approached the two of them. A human watched from the side, anxiously thinking, these are A-rank monsters that live in this forest. Did they come here because of the commotion? Three colossal beasts stood behind Adonis. Their sheer size radiated an imposing aura. The demon inside Adonis turned around and attacked them first. 3 arrows were shot, and every single one found its mark. Aquila stood off to the side, watching intently, and suddenly thought, I can't even see the arrows anymore. A human smiled smugly and said, ha ha, this is the power of Lord Adonis. I can't believe he can take out all those monsters with just one blow. Please take down that woman standing in front of you too, Lord Adonis. Upon hearing a human's words, the demon Adonis immediately turned to attack Aquila. The arrows shot out quickly, but fortunately, Aquila was nimble enough to dodge them. She frowned and thought, I can sense the heavy toxic aura from those arrows. Each time I get hit, Madam 8 Legs poison spreads further through my body, leaving me weaker. I need to finish this quickly. At that moment, Aquila turned to counterattack Adonis. She unleashed a flurry of arrows in his direction. One arrow got close, but was effortlessly absorbed by Adonis, using just his finger. Aquila looked at him, slowly absorbing the arrow. Suddenly, she broke into a smile. The arrow that had just been shot unexpectedly turned back, piercing Adonis' throat and causing him to scream in pain. Aquila stood nearby, watching him, and said, "The first arrow flies straight, but the second arrow hits its target. However, the moment your opponent dodges the second arrow, the first one will return and pierce their head." This is a skill that allows the arrow to achieve maximum spin in the air. Once it reaches its peak, it will turn back and strike the enemy. This is my unique bow that I crafted with great care after hearing about your battle with an Imperial Knight. But to her surprise, Adonis quickly pulled the arrow from his body. Aquila was taken aback. From a tree, a human's voice echoed again, "Ha ha, Aquila, no matter how powerful you are as a warrior, you've never fought a zombie before. Adonis is already dead. He won't be defeated by just an arrow through his throat." Ayan stood high above, looking down at the forest. Explosions erupted one after another, caused by Adonis. She felt a wave of worry washing over her and said, "Mom, the forest is shaking. It feels so unsettling. Please wait until we resolve this issue." Then she recalled Viker's words. "Ayan, stay hidden. From now on, I will stop a human's summoning spells and take him down." With that, Viker dashed off. As he ran, he thought a human is really afraid of Aquila, so there's a good chance he's hiding behind Adonis to stand against Aquila. As Viker expected, a human was lurking behind a tree nearby. Once he identified his target, he sprinted toward him, thinking, "I got him now. I'll take him down with one strike." Just as he was getting close to a human, Viker was suddenly attacked by someone else. She was a warrior under a human's command. She jumped out, aiming to strike Viker, but fortunately, he was able to dodge her attack. Though he tried to hide, a human had already noticed him. He turned around and shouted, "Hit you again, damn brat. I guess someone would tail me. That's why I summoned my cavalry. These warriors are strong enough to be buried in a warrior's grave." The warriors surrounded Viker, exuding a terrifying aura. Then they all charged at Viker at once. On the other side, Aquila had been struck by Adonis' arrow. She clutched her painful wound and collapsed. A human watched this unfold, laughing maniacally as he said, "Ha ha, soon you will kneel before me. The guardians of Aquila's forest will perish here, and I will rule this land. This will be a reward for the injustice I've faced my entire life. First, I'll kill every one of those who dare to look down on me." As he spoke, a human's face twisted into something more monstrous than before. His greed grew more intense by the second. Suddenly, Viker's voice rang out, "This is going to be quite a problem." Viker quickly took down all of a human's cavalry, then said, "Because those in this forest will soon become my support system." Seeing Viker defeat all of his knights left the human astonished and increasingly anxious. He thought to himself, "No way. How can he defeat even the Death Knights, who are stronger than a sword graduator? Does this kid surpass even a high-level sword graduator?" Viker looked at a human with anger on his face and said, "Have you realized all the things you've been dreaming about yet, a human?" A human turned pale at those words. He frantically shouted, "Lord Adonis." When Adonis heard him call out, he turned around, ready to take Viker down in one move. However, Aquila came up from behind and kicked him with all his strength. This created an opening for Viker to charge at Adonis. Viker's face was filled with a fierce killing intent, like wolves lunging forward to attack. A human stood by, terrified, his face dripping with sweat. He stammered, "Adonis, one more time." Before he could finish speaking, a human's hands, still together in prayer, were severed. He was left stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened, when just a second later, his head was cut off. Blood sprayed everywhere, creating a terrifying scene. Even as his head lay separated from his body, a human seemed to still have awareness. Viker was the one who had taken him down. Meanwhile, the Death Knights were attacking the warriors of the Black Tribe. The fighters were gradually losing ground. The strength of the Death Knights was overwhelming, making it very difficult to defeat them. A female warrior from the Black Tribe found herself facing a Death Knight who had just broken her weapon. She looked up at him in fear as he raised his sword. In that moment, she realized that if he swung down, it could mean her immediate death. Just as the Death Knight prepared to strike, he suddenly vanished. The girl was taken aback, her eyes wide in surprise. Like him, the other Death Knights also crumbled away, disappearing one by one. On the other side, Aquila was running low on strength. She glanced at Adonis, breathing heavily and holding her wound with one hand. Adonis' demonic appearance slowly faded away, returning to his normal state as the chilling leader of the Black Tribe. Seeing Adonis slowly fade away, Aquila stepped closer and gently placed her hand on the arm that held Adonis' bow. Before long, Adonis' body completely disappeared. Aquila softly said, "Rest easy, great ancestor." A human lay nearby, his head severed, but still shouting, "Damn it, the chance was right in front of me. I was about to take control of this entire forest. This is all your fault, child of the Empire." Viker thought to himself, looking back, he's not someone to underestimate. He turned himself into a zombie and used magical power through his voice to control the dead warriors, including Adonis. If only a human had dedicated himself to becoming a true mage. Lost in thought, a human let out a maniacal laugh and yelled, "Don't think this is the end. You will regret making me into this. You and the Black Tribe, even if I die, I will curse you all." While he was caught up in his threats, an arrow suddenly struck a human in the middle of his forehead, ending his life. Viker looked back in surprise to see Ahun standing there. Ahun's face was drenched in sweat mixed with anger. He lowered his head and said to Viker, "I'm sorry, Viker. I wish I had listened to you and killed a human when I had the chance." Viker looked at Ahun and placed his hand on his shoulder, reassuring him, "It's not your fault. You did well." A human was truly dead. His head was beginning to dissolve. The people of the Black Tribe were joyful, celebrating their victory. Ayan smiled, unable to hide his emotions. Viker continued, "Now, let's head back to the village." The slow footsteps approached the village, sunlight shining down on them, revealing brave, heroic warriors. But as they entered, the scene inside left everyone in shock. The village was in ruins, the trees had all been broken down. Ayan stepped forward, astonished. "Oh, our village. What happened here?" Someone else asked, "Has anyone been here?" Ahu moved closer, rubbing her arms as tears filled her eyes. It was Madame Eight Legs. Hearing this, Ayan's anger flared. "She came to our village." Ahun rushed towards Ahu, panicked. "Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" Viker surveyed the surroundings, spotting a body pinned beneath a fallen tree. He thought, while I was dealing with a human, Madame must have come to the village. Why would she do something like this when things were peaceful? Ahu cried in fear, pointing in one direction. That way. Before she arrived, there was smoke rising from that spot. Then the lady appeared and moved around as if she was trying to unleash her rage. Viker sat down and brushed his hands over the fallen leaves on the ground. A member of the tribe shouted, "This is the corpse of an orangutan." Viker picked up a torn leaf and concentrated, thinking, "It seems someone has burned the kind of grass that attracts insects." A human, I never imagined he was preparing things like this. Aquila saw the village in ruins and felt a surge of anger. She slammed her hand against the mountain behind her, causing it to crack. As she struck, she called out a human's name loudly. Someone behind her noticed and worriedly said, "Chief, your wound." Aquila's wound at her waist was oozing dark blood, looking very frightening. Aquila shouted in fury, "I still need to rebuild the village and find food. Warriors, gather the remains of the dead and save those who are still alive." After hearing the order, everyone hurriedly set to work together. Ayan saw Bakira trembling on the ground, one of his legs poisoned. She looked at Bakira and felt heartbroken, saying, your leg. Unable to hold back, she lay down and hugged Kira, tears streaming down her face as she continued, I'm sorry for leaving you alone." The calamity known as Madame Eight Legs is a source of fear for the tribes. She is a harmful creature, difficult to confront because she carries within her a dark core of evil. The Black Tribe views Madame Eight Legs as a natural disaster, so they have no desire for revenge or any action against her. However, it seems Viker is prepared to take action or do something. That evening, a fire flickered in the cave. Viker arrived to find Aquila sitting deep in thought, his face marked with sadness, one hand cradling a wound. He spoke up, "Chief, I have a few questions for you." Aquila looked at him and replied, "What is it?" Viker met Aquila's gaze, his face resolute as he said, "Please tell me about Madame Eight Legs." Aquila regarded him closely and replied, "You want me to tell you about the Madame?" Viker raised the hand that held a rolled-up piece of paper and said, "This is a record about her found in the Rococo tribe's village. It details the power contained in her poison, along with accounts of battles with other monsters. There are many things documented in it, including her lair. But after reading it, I felt a sense of confusion. I don't understand why the tribes here are so afraid, yet refuse to combine their strength to defeat her." After listening to Viker, Aquila slowly explained, just like with the Rococo tribe, the Black Tribe also has records about her from ancient times. These are documents about the battle between Adonis and the mistress. It was a fight between Adonis' trusted servant and the mistress. In this battle, Adonis shot an arrow that struck the mistress in her leg, and they believed they had defeated her. But in reality, that was the beginning of the disaster. The damaged leg quickly healed and doubled. Each time they tried to destroy it, the number of legs kept growing infinitely. The more they tried to annihilate her, the stronger the legs became. Even a divine arrow could not penetrate that solid body. The records also mention that everyone present in the battle was affected by the mistress's poison. They looked at the arrow and recognized the power of the toxin because remnants of it lingered on there. Over time, the mistress became an evil goddess created from countless malevolent spirits. So if you're trying to find a way to fight against the mistress, you should give up. I don't want anyone else to be harmed. Viker listened carefully, deep in thought. He reflected, the chances of me defeating Adonis or Aquila are incredibly low. But if it's a monster, that's a different story. Though these powerful beasts like Madame are rare in today's world, during the apocalypse, monsters with strength comparable to hers were often encountered. I've fought against them countless times. No matter how strong she is, she's still just a monster. And monsters have habits and weaknesses. I will find that weakness and I will personally take down Madame Eight Legs. With newfound determination, Viker stepped outside. He put on his hat, his eyes sharp and resolute, ready to hunt down and defeat Madame Eight Legs. On a high mountain, a large hole appeared at the top. Suddenly, something very sharp emerged. It was Madame Eight Legs. She was a massive spider, quite terrifying in appearance. As soon as she crawled out of her lair, she spewed venom everywhere and scurried off. Viker, hiding behind a tree below, witnessed the entire scene. Viker looked up at Madame Eight Legs and thought to himself, every time I wake up, it's always chaos. After following her hiding spot for several days, he discovered that she typically searched for food at a specific time. She would return to her lair after 2 hours. With that in mind, Viker pulled up his mask and swiftly jumped from one mountain peak to another, heading to Madame Eight Legs' home. Before long, he arrived at her lair. Standing before the entrance of her hideout was a tangled web of spider silk. This was the lady's den. From the outside, it looked like a rocky outcrop, but inside it was different altogether. A red sword appeared in his hand. He sliced through the web surrounding him to make his way inside. After some time, Viker picked up a piece of spider silk and thought, this cross-section of the spider web is rough. Even the mana of a graduator would struggle to cut through it. It would be better to use this web to descend. Having said that, Viker jumped down into the hole, using the silk to navigate his way down swiftly. After a bit, he pondered, the entrance seems too small for Madame to pass through. A deeper inside it gets wider. For her size, this place is perfect for hiding. Later, Viker managed to reach the bottom of the pit. All around him were the remains of animals and even humans, tightly wrapped in spider webs against the stone walls. Seeing them, Viker thought to himself, there are both humans and monsters here, and some bodies seem untouched, but already started to decay. Is she doing this to intimidate others, or does she enjoy toying with her prey as a pastime? It seems that the lady knows the food chain in this forest. But there's no time to dwell on this now. Before she returns, I need to investigate a lot more. Viker glanced around for a moment. Suddenly, something caught his eye. It was a nest of eggs. Looking at the eggs, Viker reached out and took one from the many that were still stuck to the rock wall. As he examined the egg, he reflected, this must be the lady's egg. So this is why so many monstrous spiders appeared when the world was destroyed. I'll take this back for analysis. Before he could finish his thought, Madame Eight Legs suddenly appeared at the mouth of the cave, startling Viker and freezing him in place. She looked down into the cave with her bloodshot eyes, her bristly fur making her appear quite fearsome. After a moment of watching, she gradually walked away. Viker had cleverly hidden behind a massive spider web, managing to avoid Madame Eight Legs. He was scared and breathed heavily, thinking with the instinct of a phantom beast, is she aware that someone has intruded into her lair? If I didn't have Mushushu's silent heal ability, I'd be done for. I'd better head back as soon as possible. In the village of the Black Tribe, everyone was diligently rebuilding the community, each person focused on their task. While working, they were chatting. Do you know where Viker is? What he's up to? It's been days since he finished setting up his tent, but I still haven't seen him come out. I saw him heading to another tribe early this morning, yet there's no smell of smoke coming from his tent. What is he doing? Maybe he's planning something and working on it. But the concerning part is, he hasn't even met with Chief Ayan. Ayan stood nervously outside Viker's tent, clearly worried and restless. After a moment, she spoke up. I've heard my mom say you asked her about the lady. She's a monster that no warrior can defeat. You wouldn't be foolish enough to try to go up against her, would you? But Kira lost a leg yesterday. I don't think he can run like he used to anymore. What if something happens to you? Ayan's eyes were filled with tears. She was on the verge of crying. Before she could finish, Viker called from inside the tent, Ayan, I need to talk to you. Come in. Ayan complied and stepped inside. The tent was dimly lit by a single lamp, and papers covered in Viker's notes were stuck to the walls. Ayan glanced around and asked, what are these? Viker replied, these are notes I've gathered about the lady from various tribes in the forest. I'm currently studying the spider web and skin I collected from her lair. I even have her eggs. When Ayan heard this, she panicked and shouted in anger. You actually went to the lady's cave? You really want to fight her? If that's the case, I'm going with you. Viker stood with his back to Ayan and said, after the battle with Adonis, your leg is still injured, right? That will just slow me down. I plan to leave this forest soon. There's still something I need to take care of, so I'll be going back to Baskerville. Upon hearing this, Ayan couldn't hide the sadness on her face and gently replied, I understand. Viker interrupted her and continued, but after I finish everything, I think I'll come back here. So right now, I'm making plans to protect the place I want to return to. Holding up an oil lamp for light, he looked around the tent filled with his plans to deal with Madame Eight Legs. He went on, and I figured out how to hunt her down. What happened to Bakira will happen to me. Anne reached out to touch the words that Viker had written. Her heart was in turmoil, but she spoke calmly. Are you really talking about hunting the lady? That's quite bold. Over the past few months, you helped us stop the forest from being poisoned and even defeated a human. You've faced seemingly impossible problems, yet you've always achieved great results. Even though she couldn't hide her emotions, Anne smiled brightly despite her eyes being on the verge of tears. She placed her hand over Viker's and continued. Viker, I've always believed in and looked forward to your words. I believe it's the same this time. You'll be okay, right? Viker responded, of course. That evening, the rain poured heavily. Viker faced a gigantic monster. As its massive hand moved to attack him, Viker swiftly severed it, but to his surprise, the monster's hand grew back instantly. Viker observed Alvin sighed and wiped the sweat from his brow. He looked at the house in front of him with pride, saying, It's finally done. His two henchmen were astonished and took turns, saying, What? Ahan, you built such a great house. Is this really for Viker? He replied, beaming with satisfaction, Viker is like a little brother to me. It's my duty as his older brother to build him a place to live. The two men laughed mockingly. Brotherly love? Didn't you used to hate him? Alvin suddenly got angry and commanded them, Shut up. Looking at the peaceful village scenery, Alvin reflected, in the end, the village has returned to its original state. This is all thanks to Viker, right? Just then, as they made a decision, Alvin said, So let's hurry up and inform Viker. As he lifted the curtain, the sight inside surprised them. The house was completely empty. After thinking for a moment, Alvin said, Viker isn't here. He must have gone out again. Alvin, feeling discouraged, rubbed his neck and said, I really want to see the look on his face when he hears this news. One guy in the group suddenly asked, Do you think Viker will react like this? In the distance, a girl worriedly overheard their conversation. So today was the day. She looked up at the changing sky and prayed, O forest god, please bless the great warrior who is about to face that disaster. It seemed like Viker could sense someone was talking about him. He gazed at the darkening sky and thought to himself, Looks like it's going to rain. The sea shifted to the mountains, where a large cave stood atop one peak. Viker looked down and mused, I bet my lady is still asleep. This is the perfect time to go after her. He reflected on how he had devised countless plans and reassured himself. I've considered many possible challenges during this hunt for my lady. That's why I've prepared various methods to handle every situation that might arise. Now it's time to put them into action. With determination, Viker quickly jumped down. His body plunged into the endless darkness of the abyss, and inside, he felt the thrill. The hunt begins. In the lair, Madame Eight Legs was sound asleep, drooling. Its appearance was painfully disturbing to look at. Madame Eight Legs hung upside down in the air while Viker gracefully jumped onto its silk threads. He quickly drew his sword and approached the monster. Viker used the sixth technique of the Baskerville clan to cut off one of Madame Eight Legs' legs. At that moment, the monster woke up. It opened its eyes wide, wanting to see who had attacked it. It roared, showcasing its strength, but Viker showed no fear, his gaze steady on it. Viker examined Madame Eight Legs' weak points and reminded himself, according to Adonis, for every leg that's lost, the number of legs that grow back will double. While he pondered, Madame Eight Legs didn't wait around. It charged forward, raising a leg to strike him. Viker wasn't one to back down. He smoothly dodged the incoming attack and thought, now is the time to execute the plan. Using his incredible speed, Viker quickly delivered countless strikes to Madame Eight Legs. The monster roared in anger. It immediately spat out its deadly poison at him. Viker skillfully dodged the toxic spray. However, unfortunately, when the poison hit the wall, it splattered back and a drop landed on his hand. Looking at his arm turning green, Viker sensed something was seriously wrong. The poison from the creature was spreading rapidly. He took a deep breath and quietly decided, I didn't want to resort to this, but now, thinking it, he acted. Viker lifted his sword and sliced off the infected arm. From the cut on his arm, something began to grow. It quickly twisted and formed a new shape. Madame Eight Legs widened her eyes in shock as she watched Viker's severed arm regrow. That was a skill he had acquired earlier. Viker calmly remarked, Don't be surprised. Now my power is on par with yours. With that, both sides charged at each other again. Viker continuously hacked away at the creature's legs while Madame Eight Legs attempted to pierce him with her limbs. Viker kept dodging and stabbing, running around as the moves unfolded. The clashing of his sword struck at Madame Eight Legs' legs, and the battle raged on. Despite being exhausted to the point of gasping for breath, the fiery determination in his eyes shone through. Viker rolled around the legs of Madame Eight Legs, then gripped one of its limbs to gain momentum. He struck another leg, blood spraying from the monster with each swing of his sword. Madam Eight Legs let out a painful roar, enraged and ready to charge at him. But Viker wasn't one to back down. He rushed toward it. After a long battle, the ground was littered with the severed legs of Madam Eight Legs. Next to them lay one of Viker's own arms. He panted heavily, going through the process of regenerating his lost limbs once again. Viker thought wearily, I wonder how many times I've been reborn now. Every time I revive, it drains so much of my energy. He glanced at the intact legs of Madam Eight Legs, feeling frustrated as he continued to ponder. Yet that monster gets to double its legs without losing any strength. Viker continued to breathe heavily. Suddenly, a smile spread across his face. He leaped onto a strand of silk, quickly propelling himself upward toward the exit of the cave. How could Madam Eight Legs possibly grant your wish? Before she could even do anything, her body suddenly collapsed onto the ground. The monstrous creature glanced around in confusion, only to see Viker, his bloodthirsty eyes twisted into a sly smile. I know I can't defeat your legs, and that's part of my plan for you to double the number of them, he said. Madam Eight Legs struggled to stand up, and Viker continued with excitement. You can double your legs every time one gets cut off. At first, it sounds like a miracle granted by some god, but it could also become your weakness. The more legs you have, the harder it is for you to move. Suddenly, a strand of web shot towards him. Viker smoothly dodged it. It turned out that Madam Eight Legs had changed her attack method because moving had become difficult. But Viker added, before coming here, I knew you'd use your webs. After studying them, I found a critical weakness. Your webs can't be burned by normal fire. As he spoke, Viker raised his Beelzebub sword. The purple flames radiating from the blade gave off an eerie glow, matching the unusual excitement and delight on Viker's face. He continued, but if consumed by the purple flames from hell, it will burn like kindling. Furthermore, this place is filled with gas leaking from the corpses. As he spoke, images of the charred corpses hanging everywhere in the cave came to mind. Viker slowly hopped onto the head of a bear corpse. Calmly, he continued, isn't this an incredibly favorable condition for the flames to ignite? You've sown too much bad karma just because you become drunk on your own power. As he spoke, a bloodthirsty, twisted expression emerged on Viker's face. Madam Eight Legs widened her eyes and stared at him intently. Viker decisively plunged his sword into the bear's head and announced, all right, now it's time for you to pay for all of that. Flames immediately surged from the surrounding corpses, engulfing the entire cave. Viker recalled how, the night before, he had made a plan. He was astonished to discover that while engaging in real combat to enhance his skills and countering a pack of Cerberus, the monstrous creatures driven out of the Black Mountain range, he had posed a question to himself. Why did the tribes drive away such dangerous enemies and terrifying monsters from the Black Mountain range? The image of the three-headed hellhound flashed before him, the fierce creature radiating a thick aura of killing intent. At that moment, Viker looked back at the map and realized that the answer was that they wanted to take the land to live on. The people in the tribe had been defeated by the lady and forced to flee to the Black Mountains. Viker smiled with satisfaction. He told himself, now I understand the motives behind her actions. In reality, she had used the people from the jungle tribe to drive away the demons from hell. Viker stared at the pile of silk in the jar burning in the purple flames and reached his final conclusion. She did this to avoid the hellfire. That's her weakness. He thought further, I never imagined that her weakness would be something so familiar to me. Back in the present, Viker raised the Beelzebub sword confidently. He decisively stabbed it through the head of the dead bear. Then Viker conjured hellfire at the blade's tip. The bear's corpse immediately ignited, spreading flames to the surrounding area. The other corpses were also affected and caught fire. A purple flame erupted, impossible to extinguish. Madam Eight Legs was engulfed by the flames. Viker calmly stepped away. He looked at the smoking mountain from a distance, seeing it continue to burn endlessly. Viker thought to himself, now I understand what makes Madam afraid. It's the hellfire. So all I need to do is find a way to keep her from escaping this spider-filled cave. With all those legs, she won't be able to jump out. In fact, she wouldn't even be able to use her webs to move. Basically, there's no way for her to get out. Thinking about Madam Eight Legs' ugly face, Viker happily mused, under the intense heat of the flames, Madam will start to melt away. While he was lost in thought, the ground suddenly trembled. Viker exclaimed in shock, what's happening? He watched as the earth and rocks around him began to slide away. The cause of the disturbance came from the mountain, where Madam Eight Legs had been engulfed by flames. The fire suddenly went out, leaving only billowing black smoke as evidence of its former fury. Suddenly, the mountain split in two, rocks and earth crashing down in large chunks. Viker instantly became alert, horrified by the scene unfolding before him, unable to hold back a gasp. What is happening? He watched as Madam Eight Legs calmly emerged from the mountain, completely unharmed. Viker was taken aback. Did she destroy the whole mountain? Madame Eight Legs moved her scorched body away, growling angrily as if she were hunting for prey to take revenge on. With her gaze aimed at the sky, she unleashed a stream of venom. The poison shot out like fireworks, a beautiful yet deadly display. Acidic rain fell upon the trees, snapping countless branches as the toxic substance ate through them. Viker stood directly beneath Madame Eight Legs. He worried that she might not see him, as her eyes and skin were burned from the flames. His attention focused on the large round eye of the creature, then shifted to her scarred and charred body. Suddenly, Viker spotted a crack in the creature's body. He thought to himself, the fact that she destroyed the mountain isn't entirely bad for me. With that in mind, Viker swiftly jumped up. He moved quickly across Madame Eight Legs' long legs, leaned to the side, and raised his sword, reminding himself, what I need to target are the cracks created when she demolished the mountain. Once again, Viker employed the sixth technique of the Baskerville clan and drove straight through the visible crack. He struck fiercely at the monster, but it seemed ineffective. Seeing Madame Eight Legs roar in anger, Viker quickly dodged to the side, thinking, one strike isn't going to take it down easily. I'll need to hit it again. He clenched his teeth and cautiously eyed the creature. Its sharp eyes were suddenly staring right at him. Then, out of nowhere, it turned to stone. The creature's eyes immediately regained their glow, purple light flashing as they fixed on Viker. He felt a surge of fear and thought her eyes. Before he could finish his thought, Madame Eight Legs lifted a leg, aiming to deal with him. Viker was swiftly knocked away, landing on the ground as he murmured to himself, I've made a mistake. Viker felt exhausted as he glanced down. He saw the path where he had been blasted away and his legs disappearing, then thought, I can't believe her eyes can regenerate after the outer layer fell off. Both of my legs are gone. He felt his body losing strength, making his regeneration slower than before. Viker was panting, watching the monster slowly approach. Madame Eight Legs was advancing, growling. Realizing the creature was getting closer, Viker urged himself in his mind, hurry up, grow back already. Suddenly, a voice rang out, why are you here? Fighting that monster? You should have left this forest a long time ago. A leg of someone stood right next to him. The next words shocked Viker, making his eyes widen. If you want to get revenge on Hugo, you should only focus on killing him. The figure gradually came into view before him. It was none other than Viker himself in his past life. The figure looked at him coldly, repeatedly reminding him, that is your only desire. Viker stared wide-eyed, listening to the voice that was speaking. Why are you fighting that beast? The person beside him continued to remind him, you should have left this forest a long time ago. Viker gasped, hearing the figure blame him. You only have one goal to take revenge on Hugo, and the only thing you need to think about is how to kill Hugo. The shadow of that person gradually became clearer in front of Viker. His own face from his past life, cold and serious, kept reminding him, because that is your desire in this life. Viker was stunned as he looked back at that figure, whose face was now right next to him, continuing, it's only because of what happened in the forest that desire has become increasingly blurred. The scarred face yelled at him in fury, you must kill Hugo. Put the knife to his throat for me. Viker struggled with his thoughts without realizing that Madame Eight Legs had come very close. Memories of his past life surfaced. Viker Van Baskerville, with a scar on his face, serious and intense. Back then, he had to endure countless injuries caused by Hugo's hands. Viker thought to himself, the only reason to exist is to carry out the mission assigned by the master. Even if it costs him his life, he must see it through. Viker knelt at Hugo's feet like a loyal subordinate. From the moment he was born, he had been raised that way. It had become his way of life and the only thing that gave him a sense of pride. But even with such loyalty, the memory of his own beheading and past life flashed before him. He recalled his bewildered face, still unable to believe what was happening as he looked at Hugo. He silently told himself, in the end, your head still fell beneath your master's sword. In that moment, he realized that he had wasted his life. Viker remembered how he had been abandoned while Hugo had coldly turned away without looking back. Now the Viker of the past kept reminding him, you need to make Hugo experience that same pain and incredibly desperate feeling. Then he felt rage at his current actions, but now he was ruining everything. You must kill Hugo and wipe out the Baskerville clan. The man's eyes widened, blood streaming down his face. It felt like a chain was holding Viker back, the brainwashing words echoing in his mind. That was the only reason Viker Van Baskerville existed in the world. Viker stared up at the sky, remembering Hugo's figure from back then and wondering, what is the reason for my existence? In his past life, had he ever thought about going against Hugo? Viker pondered and recalled a moment. Suddenly, he remembered. That was when I wanted to leave the team. Back then, Viker had paused to take in his surroundings while his teammates moved ahead, oblivious to him. In the end, he turned around and chased after them. He found himself back in the same place as everyone else, confined and struggling like before. Remembering this made him scoff at himself, but he had accepted following the path set by the chain. The long chain kept dragging him in its desired direction. He felt numb, brainwashing himself with the thought, I'm just a hunting dog that Hugo has cleverly trained. Thinking of this made Viker clench his teeth in anger as he tried to argue back against the ghost of his past. Don't force me to do this anymore, whether it's obeying Hugo or seeking revenge on him. The cold gaze from his past self watched him with a chilling intensity. Viker screamed wildly, I am the one who gets to decide. In his mind, he pictured a bloodthirsty dog. Viker thought, yes, only after Hugo's head rolls will a worthless hunting dog like me be safe from being cooked alive. In my past life, I made a wrong choice. The images of two ghosts from my former life began to fade away. At this moment, Viker realized that what he truly desired was to confront the monster Madame Eight Legs that was roaring. It seemed pleased that he couldn't escape. It raised a leg to strike down at him. Now, Viker fully understood what he wanted, to be free. He grabbed the ground, quickly dodging the monster's attack. His body rolled painfully across the dirt. He recalled Hugo's cold, icy gaze, then thought of the peaceful life in the Black Tribe, and silently reflected, revenge and protecting the place I want to live. All of it is my deep longing. Viker stood up, determination clear on his face. He resolved, I want to live life on my own terms, so I will stand up and fight back. Madame Eight Legs raised her leg behind him once again. Viker was unaware, still lost in thought. From now on, I won't live under anyone's control again. Suddenly, a gust of hair flew by. Madame Eight Legs' leg was attacked immediately. Though the blow wasn't particularly strong, it did make her pause for a moment. Then several more strikes rained down on Madame Eight Legs. Viker widened his eyes in astonishment. He looked up towards the distant mountain where a group of people and night foxes with bows and arrows were gathered. They shouted, You won't hurt our mate, you horrid spider claw. Aeon signaled to him anxiously, Viker, I've come to fight alongside you. There were also the Black Warriors. Following her was a multitude from her tribe, all poised and ready for battle. Ahn scolded from the side, Why are you trying to handle this all by yourself without telling me? One person from a different clan shouted loudly, Viker is fighting with a lady. Everyone get ready and support the hero of the forest. At his call, everyone drew their bows and aimed at Madame Eight Legs. However, their arrows not only failed to wound the creature, but only served to anger it further. Viker had regained his legs. He calmly stepped on its foot and said, Even if I speak, you all will just advise her to give up. Viker stood coolly on the back of the monster. He raised his sword and continued, But thanks to you, I managed to escape death, Aeon. The sword plunged into the creature, but it couldn't penetrate its skin. Viker was defeated by Madame Eight Legs and unwilling to accept defeat, thought, Still not dead. Then let's try again. His eyes reflected determination. Viker raised his sword once more. The legs of Madame Eight Legs began to move. Enraged, it stomped around, causing rocks and dirt to fly everywhere. The members of Clan Black dodged the creature's legs, continuously warning each other. Be careful, she's starting to go wild. Aeon shouted to encourage them. Viker has made her furious. Everyone don't hold back, keep fighting. Aquila stood at a distance, watching Madame Eight Legs thrash around, her brow furrowed in thought. Aquila glanced at the wound on her stomach and thought, For a long time, everyone has seen the lady as a natural disaster without any intention to resist. Every cell in their bodies feels this way, but that young warrior is different. She watched Viker struggle to fight the monster, observing his wild, animal-like eyes and assessing he has pushed past his fear and is facing this disaster head-on. With determination, Aquila opened her bright green eyes wide and resolved. No matter if I cough up blood or if my wound opens wider, I have to strike a blow to create a path for that warrior. With all of her strength, Aquila raised her bow. A brilliant blue light enveloped her arrow. She released it, sending it flying swiftly toward Madame Eight Legs with great force. The monster took the full brunt of the attack, slightly leaning to one side and staring intently at the source of the arrow. Seizing the moment, Viker rushed forward. His eyes were filled with determination, glimmering red. Suddenly, his speed increased dramatically. Viker pivoted slightly and lifted his sword. The monster was instantly attacked. Madame Eight Legs let out a painful roar, while Viker gritted his teeth, preparing for his next attack. He unleashed the first technique of the Baskerville clan, deeply piercing fang. Aeon gasped, exclaiming, Viker has merged with the lady. Viker executed his move step by step. Second, biting fang. Third, slicing fang. Fourth, tearing fang. Fifth, shredding fang. Madame Eight Legs was now bleeding profusely. Viker felt like a wild beast shackled by chains. He quietly vowed, It's time to end this cursed life of bondage. Madame Eight Legs' wide-open eyes mirrored her agony. Suddenly, countless cuts pierced through them. Viker thought, I refuse to live the life of a hunting dog any longer. He now prepared the sixth technique of the Baskerville clan to break the chains. This move shattered everything, a decisive blow aimed at the monster. Viker poured all his strength into this final strike. The lady, now a mad creature, thrashed about, uncontrollably screaming loudly. One of the lady's eyes seemed to have something stirring inside it, as if something were trying to escape. Suddenly, a figure leaped out from within her pupil, causing her to scream in horror. The people below were stunned, whispering, "Did Viker just burst out of the lady's eye?" The creature crashed to the ground, shaking the entire forest. The crowd shouted, "She has fallen." From the midst of the swirling dust, Viker lay flattened on the ground, his clothes torn, next to the lady who was gasping for breath. He felt the painful realization that the poison was spreading through his body, and her blood also carried that poison. He looked up, grimly thinking, and the lady seems to be on the brink of death. His eyes slowly began to close as his thoughts grew weaker. I need to force the poison out of my body quickly. Suddenly, a deep red tongue wrapped around his arm, lifting it and pulling him closer. It was the creature resembling the lady, but larger and more savage. It was curly, strong, and ravenous, its eyes glowing red as they fixated on something. Around them were countless other fierce monsters. They rushed in to tear apart the frail lady. Her cries of pain echoed all around. In the dark of night, he heard a familiar voice calling out to him. "Viker, there's poison here. It's really dangerous. Don't come any closer." He slowly opened his eyes, and the voice continued urging him on. "Come on, Viker, you can't die. I'm not done with you yet. You still can't fully wake up." He called out for Ayan, making those around him worry. He calmly replied, "I'm fine. Lower your voice. You're being too loud. I can't rest like this." I heard her sobbing. Does Viker even know how worried I am? This silly guy. At that moment, the poison on his hand began to spread and form a smaller version of the huge monster from before. After a brutal night, the sunlight of the new day shone down. Everyone in the tribe was still fast asleep after the feast from the night before. Aquila and another person sat on a rock drinking. Viker slowly sat up. He looked at the battlefield before him and sighed. So the days of the festival have passed. People in the tribe really do enjoy their celebrations. Elsewhere, Bakira cheerfully approached. He greeted his uncle. "Bakira, how's your health now?" He reached up to scratch his chin and continued speaking. "Even though Bakira has lost a leg, you still managed to defeat others and find a mate. I'm proud of you. I made sure the mistress paid a price, so you don't have to worry anymore." Suddenly, he remembered something, glancing in his right arm. He recalled that after killing the mistress, he could use the seventh fang. Although it wasn't perfect, he had achieved something after that fight, and he gained more real-world experience in life and death battles. He thought about the head of the Baskerville family. How could Hugo use the seventh fang? Mine isn't even complete yet, so attacking a swordsman like Hugo would likely be very difficult. He tightened the flower crown around his neck and silently vowed, "But compared to who I was before, I'm much stronger now. I just need to finish my mission in this forest." The confident hero stood with determination. It was time to return to Baskerville. He yanked the wreath down. From behind, a shadowy figure watched him closely. As the dawn broke and the sun lit the mountain ranges, everything was ready for the journey ahead. He said, "Thank you for allowing me to leave." The Night Fox replied, "I have no reason to keep you here." She smiled and continued, "Once your family for life. No matter where we are, we will always be like one big family. Wherever you go, you will always be the leader of the black hunting team. So don't forget that." He happily replied, "Thank you." He looked around, searching for someone, feeling a pang of disappointment. Is she not coming? Maybe she doesn't want me to leave. Viker turned around and said his goodbyes. "Well, I'm off now." All the members of the black tribe called out, tears in their eyes. "Don't forget us. Travel safely and return to the Empire. I'll pray for you." Aholan Alton chimed in too. "Brother, make sure to come back. We'll always be here waiting for you. Viker, remember to reach out to us." Everyone had given him the best wishes. Goodbye, Viker, our hero. He closed his eyes with satisfaction and took steady steps forward. Suddenly, he found himself face to face with Ayan. They stood opposite each other in the breezy field. He was a bit surprised and called out to her, "Ayan." She looked sad and asked, "Are you really leaving?" Viker hesitated, struggling to find the words. Immediately, she handed him a large package and quickly said, "Take this with you." He asked, confused, "What is this?" Ayan shyly explained, "Anubis. This is the bowl of Lord Adonis. I don't use it much, so you should take it." He realized that was why he hadn't seen her around earlier. Ayan hesitated again before placing a necklace around his neck. He looked puzzled and asked, "A necklace with a broken chain?" She quickly clarified, "When you fainted, you kept mumbling about the chain and hunting dogs, so I made this for you." Then she said seriously, "Viker, you're not a hunting dog. A hunting dog can't be like you. You're a wolf. Wolves are never chained down." He replied gently, "That's surprising, thank." Not waiting for him to finish, she stepped closer and grabbed the short chain around his neck, pulling him near. As they were just about to touch lips, Anne suddenly burst into tears. In the end, she chose to walk away, leaving behind a few words of explanation. I heard that people in the Empire usually say goodbye like this. You may have been younger than me before, but now when you've grown up, safe travels. She left Viker standing there, confused and watching her go. He gently responded, I had no idea the Empire had a way of saying goodbye like that. I'll see you again. Anne paused, rubbed her eyes, tucked her hair behind her ear, and turned to give him a bright smile, even though her eyes still held tears. I'll see you again. Viker stood before the cliff, looking down at the Empire shrouded in the calm of night. He thought to himself, Red All Castle, it's been a while since I've been back to this place. Viker scanned the surroundings and said to himself, the Morg family is still mining the ruby, right? That means they're still working with the Baskerville family. He recalled the image of the red-haired girl in striking metal armor and wondered, I wonder if she's still around. His curiosity was undeniable. What would he even say when they met again? But I'm feeling pretty worn out. He jumped down and landed softly. Pulling his hood up, he began planning his next move. It's late. I need to find an inn. Suddenly, he spotted a towering statue ahead. He was suspicious. Is that a golden statue? When was it erected? Viker closely examined it, analyzing the details. To create a sculpture like this, both families would need to agree. Did Hugo actually approve this? Just then, a voice called out to him. You, what are you doing here? A guard had spotted him. The guard shouted, don't touch the hero statue. If you take even a little gold, I won't let you off easy, and don't even think about getting any closer. Step back. He turned around, puzzled, and asked, a hero. The soldier confidently replied, what? Are you a foreigner? You really don't know who that hero is? At this point, the soldier's eyes lit up. His voice brimmed with pride as he continued, I can't believe there's anyone in the Empire who doesn't know about him. I saw him fight with my own eyes. With just one strike, he wiped out the barbarians, showcasing the spirit of a true knight. This hero made a great effort to save the lady of the Morg family. Alone, he defeated a massive monster, enabling his teammates to escape with their lives. The soldier kept passionately recounting the story of this hero. The tale of his sacrifice was both moving and intense, to the point where the Morg family built a golden statue in his honor. Viker could only remain silent, questioning, this can't be true. The guard firmly stated, you must remember 2 years ago that great hero lived right here and his name is Viker van Baskerville. With that, the soldier's face shone with pride and admiration. Viker, being the real deal, felt awkward and didn't know how to react to this tough situation. He simply replied, oh, is that so? Finally, he made his way to an inn. Inside, it was lively and noisy, with a singing voice filling the air. There was a sense of exhilaration, accompanied by the sound of beer mugs being placed heavily on the tables. High sis, mid sis, and low sis were chattering excitedly. We still can't forget the thrill of meeting Viker for the first time. That's right, he's really handsome, just perfect. She happily shared that during their first encounter, they immediately saw his true worth. Others chimed in agreement. Absolutely, the story of Viker has been passed around by the folks in the fortress. She continued enthusiastically, he's truly charming, but beautiful things are often hard for me, right? But we managed to talk to him for a long time, even though those 3 little guys from Baskerville tried to block us, she added shyly. Looking at his beauty, all their fatigue seemed to vanish. The Morg triplets kept chattering, saying even that golden statue doesn't capture his beauty fully. Meanwhile, Viker, who prided himself on being the real deal, felt confused and suspicious after hearing everything. He thought to himself, this is so different from what I experienced. Did the achievements of Adolf Morg and the allies that day have anything to do with me? I did fight against the lady, but I've just learned surprising things from these triplets. He recalled the angry face of the head of the Baskerville family, and doubt crept in. Since I went missing 2 years ago, they said Hugo was furious and kept bothering the Morg family multiple times. Although the Morgs gave a huge amount of value to the Baskervilles, it seemed Hugo was still angry. He started to theorize. It made sense to be upset about losing such a valuable hunting dog. It could also be that the Morg's compensation was insufficient. The triplets continued to boast, saying if he were alive, he would have been a worthy rival for me. What? What are you saying? If he were alive, I would have killed him already. Stop bickering. We should stick together. There's no point in arguing. After all, he's dead. Hearing their baseless gossip, Viker stood up to pay. He felt uncomfortable and couldn't bear to listen any longer. Suddenly, one of the 3 girls noticed him. She pointed at him and shouted, hey, you in the shady outfit, come here. Instinctively, whispers and murmurs began to spread around. Another girl commented, even the barbarians don't make this much noise after drinking. This girl is drunk again. Yet she insisted, you're all too chatty. My instincts tell me that guy over there is really suspicious. Why don't you go back and confront him? He stole a quick glance behind him. Without hesitation, she charged straight at him, swinging her arms as if about to do something wild. Furiously, she demanded, "Why are you ignoring me?" In an instant, she used her powers to bind him. Vines shot up from the ground, trying to wrap around his legs. However, he quickly leaped into the air and managed to escape. Everyone was shocked by his acrobatic dodge. He landed softly, but he couldn't escape the overwhelming number of people surrounding him, all pointing their weapons at him. They kept asking, "Who are you? Take off your hat and cloak." He frowned, thinking this is annoying, but it doesn't really matter. I was going to let Bestu's family know I've returned anyway. He pulled off his hat and cloak, and the triplet sisters were instantly stunned, their faces turning red. Oh my gosh, it's him. One guy quickly recognized him and gasped, "What? That face. Even though it's a bit dirty, I can sense that coldness and those dark eyes." No way. The three sisters stuttered. It's Viker. They shouted throughout the tavern. The next day, the triplet sisters were saying goodbye to Viker, who could have stayed in the castle's VIP area. He politely declined, saying, "It's fine. I'm not paying for food and lodging anyway." They continued boasting, "I can't believe it. Viker is back. You met us first. Were you looking for us? We spread the word. Everyone knows you returned because of what was said yesterday." Viker coldly replied, "I'm just asking to send a message to the Baskerville house." They quickly chimed in, "I thought this special news would be spread far and wide." He sighed inwardly, thinking, sure enough, they're really bothersome. The triplet sisters said in unison, "We'll take you there." Viker shrugged, "You girls are busy. I can go by myself." They replied, "No, we're not busy. We'll just be sleeping." Viker thought to himself, "When I get back, I have to report to Morg about how lazy my subordinates are." He turned and asked, "By the way, what is Camus Morg doing?" The three girls immediately trembled and hesitated before answering. "She's gone into hiding to train. She suddenly left Lord Adolph's Legion and joined the Dark Legion. Now she's focused on studying magic." He felt bewildered, recalling, "The Dark Legion? Before I rewound time, her relationship with Snake, the leader of the Dark Group, was really bad. Have I changed the future?" He instructed them, "Please tell Campus Morg that I want to see her and urge her to leave the Dark Legion." Then Viker mounted his horse and rode away, leaving the triplet sisters confused, asking themselves, what does he mean by that? Their relationship was good before, so why does he want to meet her? The hero of Red All Mountain had returned. The news quickly spread throughout the Empire, bringing great joy to everyone. Information reached all those connected to Viker. The urgent call for the clan chief rang out. The man and his steward, startled by the news, exchanged surprised looks. The head of the Baskerville family stood still, asking, "Is it true? Viker Van Baskerville has come back?" Chihuahua Baskerville cheerfully remarked, "Last time, he snuck in through the window, but this time, he can walk right through the front door. Welcome back, sir, Deputy Consul." Viker, feeling a bit overwhelmed, asked, "But, Chihuahua, why are all those people gathered outside?" The steward explained, "The story of the Deputy Consul's life has spread all across the Empire. When they heard you were back, they came to welcome you." Standing by the window, Viker could only sigh in resignation. This is exhausting. Suddenly, Pomerian La Baskerville burst in, calling out, "Dad." The little girl proudly showed the small mouse she had caught to Viker, saying, "Sam Chun, Daddy, this is its name." He gently patted her head and replied, "Pomerian, I'm not your dad, I'm your uncle." The girl lifted the little white mouse in her hand and said, "I caught a mouse." He answered, "Oh, it's a rodent. It's pretty cute. You should be careful not to catch any diseases." She obediently replied, "Yes." Then Viker turned to ask about the situation. "Mr. Chihuahua, have all the issues in Underdog been resolved?" The old man replied, "Thanks to your recommendation of Cindy Wendy, everything has been sorted out nicely. She knows her stuff really well." He stood up and continued, "However, there is one matter that even Cindy Wendy couldn't figure out." He took out a stack of documents and said seriously, "Recently, children in the slums have been disappearing one by one. Their parents haven't heard anything about them. We've checked the black market and found nothing, so we still don't know the motive behind the kidnappings. It doesn't even seem like they were taken by monsters, as the kids vanished without a trace." He seriously analyzed, "Although there's no concrete evidence, I believe it's all the work of the same criminal." Viker suddenly gripped the notes about the case tightly. His face darkened as he realized that the missing children incident in Underdog City seemed linked to the accusations against him from a past life. Confused, he thought to himself, "No, that happened much later. Could it possibly be related to what's going on now?" The call from Pomerian caught both men's attention. "Dad, look at this." He turned and replied, "Marion, I'm busy right now." The little girl excitedly showed him. This mouse came back to life. Immediately, that strange revelation stunned both the manager and Viker. He skeptically asked Pomerian, "You brought it back to life?" She nodded happily, "Yes." He observed her and pondered, this is clearly a resurrection of the dead, a type of dark magic that uses mana from the shadow realm, right? Then he immediately asked the girl, when did you start using that kind of magic? Pomerian awkwardly raised her hand to count. 1 night, 2 nights, and then 3 nights. I secretly watched the others in the tribe and copied them. He began to worry, recalling how Pomerian had been discovered in a village of the Rococo tribe. Could it be that she had learned black magic and soul-calling techniques from them? The children from the Baskerville and Morg families were considered geniuses. By the age of 8, they could already sense mana. On the other hand, Pomerian was using mana from the underworld. How could a 5-year-old manage that? A magical genius from the bloodline of Baskerville and also a prodigy in black magic had been born. How would Hugo react if he found out about this? He envisioned Hugo's fierce, angry face and the harsh words he might say. Black magic. And on top of that, mixed with the blood of barbarians, she would be sentenced to death right away. He felt anxious. He clearly has a cold-blooded nature. It's best not to let her meet him. Suddenly, the Chihuahua manager received a letter that left him visibly worried. Vice Consul, we have a problem, he said. What is it? The Vice Consul asked. The manager stammered. It's that, the head of the clan. I don't understand. Calm down and explain, the Vice Consul replied. The manager trembled and said, the clan leader is coming here. On the table, 2 cups of tea had long gone cold. The Chihuahua manager stood to one side, feeling tense, while across from him was the butler John Barry. Facing each other were Viker and Hugo. The family patriarch spoke up. I've returned. Viker politely responded, yes, I'm back. The office manager felt a bit relieved and quietly celebrated that they were finally talking. Viker thought for a moment, since Hugo came unexpectedly, I only managed to send Pomerian to the next room, but I hope nothing goes wrong. Hugo continued to ask, how have you been lately? Viker replied, I've been drifting on the river and living with the Mani to focus on healing my injuries. He said seriously, during that time, I pretended to befriend the barbarians and now have come up with a plan to eliminate them. The old man showed interest, saying, well, is that so? He continued, we will control the barbarians by supplying them with imperial goods. To them, glass beads and crafts are cheap items, while food and fresh produce are precious. If we take advantage of this, we can easily manage them. The old man asked, so it's just about using trade to subdue them? He explained, no. In the process of trading, they will need to shed blood. His eyes sparkled brightly at this point. Who will ask them to slay monsters in exchange for imperial products? Old Hugo seriously analyzed, we can say that we're making them kill the monsters, and as they bleed, it will help us expand our territory. Hugo's eyes also lit up with a red spark, and he praised, quite a clever plan, truly worthy of being my son. He replied, I have already prepared the infrastructure. The old man, satisfied, said, good, I leave this task to you. The office manager, Chihuahua, was stunned and speechless, thinking, is this how a father-son conversation goes after so many days apart? Across the room, the butler John quietly observed, I can't believe the chief is smiling like before. For the past 2 years since Viker vanished, he hasn't smiled even for a second. Then Viker calmly sipped his tea. He was secretly calculating, right now, I don't want the black tribe to be slaughtered by the Baskerville family. From Hugo's perspective, that tribe will spill blood for killing a monster. But in reality, they are just returning to the lady's land. For now, I've managed to prevent a clash and buy time for black to strengthen. Hugo has no idea about the lady's existence, so he thinks black can negotiate easily, unaware that his enemies are growing stronger by the day. Suddenly, the teacup emitted a thick stream of steam. Old Hugo only needed to say, ah, and the tea inside started boiling furiously. A menacing aura radiated from him as he declared, we will not negotiate with the Rococo tribe. I will personally eliminate them. You should keep that in mind. The ominous energy immediately left the Chihuahua manager feeling disoriented. Viker, trying to stay calm, replied, I understand now. He realized, indeed, he hates the Rococo clan. I need to make sure Pomerian doesn't run into him. Hugo began to reflect and said, it's been a long time since we've seen each other, and here I'm only talking about those wretched barbarians. Son, from now on, you don't have to overwork yourself anymore. Once you rescue the young lady from the Morg clan who went missing, you'll receive special recognition from the Morg family. The royal family has also heard about it and has rewarded the Baskerville clan for their noble spirit. But losing you would mean everything is pointless to me. What matters is that you are still alive. So please try not to push yourself too hard. Suddenly, a thought popped into Viker's mind, hypocritical. He remembered the day he was wronged. I was falsely accused. I felt the sting of a blade piercing my back. The cold, sharp looks from the hunting dogs, all in it together, were aimed right at me. In that moment, I clearly felt abandoned by my master. He didn't even give me a chance to explain. That's how he treated me. A flash of lightning struck, lighting up the whole room. Viker's fiery red eyes glinted as he spoke sharply. Thanks for your concern, Dad. Suddenly, Pomerian burst in, yelling, It's so cold and stormy. I'm really scared. The little girl broke down in tears, clinging to her brother. Your face is pale. We're done for. I don't want Hugo and Pomerian to meet. He froze bewildered. What? Old Hugo stood up, visibly furious. How could this happen? He quickly shifted to a look of confusion. That face, the master of the iron-blooded Baskerville, one of the 7 families of the great rock empire, Hugo le Baskerville, was the man who had driven the barbarians out of the empire. He was a swordsman who had slain hundreds of monsters. Once he made a decision, he would see it through to the end. He was also known as a man of iron blood, quite literally. But now, Hugo's emotions began to waver. He froze, staring at the girl's face and asked, Could it be? The little girl was still clinging tightly to Viker. Uncle, the thunder is booming. I'm so scared. In a hurry, he called out, Penelope. The girl looked up at the sound of his voice and then began to cry. Wah, I'm so scared. That beard, I'm so scared. Viker quickly raised his hand to calm her down and said, Father, please stay calm. This is just the little one I brought back to help with odd jobs. When I saw her red eyes, I thought she might belong to our family. But after checking, I found out she comes from a tribe at the border, so there's no way she could be related to you. At this, Hugo went silent. He held his forehead and lamented, if Penelope were still alive, she wouldn't be this small anymore. I must be mistaken. The steward spoke up concerned. Master. Viker sighed and replied, I'm exhausted. I'm going home now. Viker said, Drive safely, father. He felt uneasy. Hugo, a man with the spirit of a master swordsman, was showing such a baffled expression. Something must be wrong. Suddenly, the old man turned and reminded him, Oh, I almost forgot you need to attend the grand party tomorrow. He replied, I'll see you tomorrow night, Dad. The Chihuahua manager quickly realized that if it was indeed a lavish party, only a few family members would be allowed to attend. It was the kind of event everyone in the family longed to be a part of. In the end, Hugo cast one last glance at Pomerian before leaving. As night fell, Viker lay awake on the floor, feeling strangely contemplative. Despite having taken a warm bath and lying on a cozy blanket, sleep wouldn't come. He reflected on the past. The habits from living with the Black Tribe seemed to take time to change. Looking back, Hugo's reaction back then really surprised me. Should I tell him the truth about Pomerian and the pendant or not? His reaction had indeed given him some clues. He decided he should observe Hugo's actions during the party tomorrow night. If he could leverage it, Pomerian's presence could be the perfect piece to outsmart Hugo. But he also had to come up with a way to avoid hurting Pomerian. Slowly, Viker drifted off to sleep. The wind started blowing strongly, making the curtains in his room flutter. Suddenly, a mysterious woman appeared. She pulled out a knife and walked toward the bed. Then he spoke up, I've only been back here for less than a day. News spreads fast, doesn't it? Immediately, Viker sprang up and kicked the knife out of her hand, sending it crashing into the wall. Just as he was about to strike, she stammered, Wait, I was just joking. He recognized her voice. It's you. He carefully reminded her, Next time you come, use the front door. If I hadn't recognized you and acted first, it could have been dangerous. She replied, Who would want to sleep on the floor when they could be in a warm bed? It's just weird. You came back from the dead and still act the same way. She gradually pulled down the scarf covering her face. She looked pleased and said, It's been a while. Viker van Baskerville. He chided her. Couldn't you come in through the front door, Cindy Wendy? She asked, Did you send Mr. Chihuahua to follow me? How did you know I'd come here to the girl who got 10 billion? He calmly responded, I've done my homework on you. To earn a client's trust, you have to help them get rich first before draining their money. She responded cheerfully, Are you saying I'm just taking their money? That's a bit harsh, Jill, do you think? I'm just doing my job as a financial planner. She said nonchalantly, If it weren't for me, Judy would waste that 10 billion anyway. He replied, That's why we assigned a bodyguard to keep her from doing that. She wondered, what bodyguard would be able to do that? Viker patiently explained, I blended a financial expert in with the bodyguards. His job is to weed out fraudulent traders. She looked puzzled, but I haven't seen any of the bodyguards doing anything. He confidently answered, That's because I instructed them not to approach you. Cindy nodded in understanding. So from the very beginning, I've been in the palm of your hand, huh? He said, What's more important is whether you have the documents I requested. She rummaged through her things. I brought them with me. She pulled out the scroll of paper and said, Here. He helplessly replied, 2 years have passed and you changed a bit, haven't you? Next time, remember to put those in an envelope. He added with satisfaction, As promised, I will help you trade with the locals. She cheerfully responded, It seems I'll have to start calling you boss from now on. Viker examined the scroll. It contained information about the guests attending the important banquet tomorrow. Being invited to such a significant event affirmed her position within the family. Information 1. Hugo of Baskerville. Position, clan leader. Noble title, Marquette. Martial arts title, swordsmanship master. Note, includes all direct descendants from a single mother, illegitimate children, collateral bloodline, and adopted children. The total number of children is... He felt disappointed. There was no noteworthy information at all. Suddenly, Viker realized, are these people attending the party too? Boston Baskerville, the captain of the Pimple Knights and a member of the Senate, held the noble title of Count and had the martial title of highest-ranked graduator. He was half-brothers with Hugo Baskerville and hated being tied down. He had an aggressive and hot-tempered personality. Great Dane Baskerville, captain of the Mastiff Knights and also a member of the Senate, shared the same noble title of Count and the martial title of highest-ranked graduator. He was another half-brother of Hugo Baskerville. Great Dane did not like to fit in with others, but he had a special relationship with Count Boston. Viker pressed further. They usually don't attend family parties, do they? What's going on here? She explained, isn't it obvious? They want to meet the legendary Baskerville who was returned from the dead. They probably want you to join their knights. He looked over the list again and sighed. Tomorrow is going to be really tiring. The last name on the list was Osiris Baskerville. He was a member of the lower house, held the noble title of Marquess, and had the martial title of highest-ranked graduator. He was the son of Hugo Baskerville and currently the most qualified candidate to inherit the position of clan leader. He thought, so, Osiris is attending too. Cindy Wendy said, the eldest son of the Baskerville family is starting to mirror Hugo's past. His swordsmanship is on par with the 7th Count, so everyone believes he will soon reach the rank of master. Viker felt tense as he thought back, recalling, I remember having met Osiris a few times. He's a quiet and cold person, even ignoring his subordinates and those who are directly related to him. She asked, if we exclude the clan leader and the 7 counts, then he's the strongest in the family, right? Or are you stronger than him? He coldly replied, don't think you can uncover my combat abilities. Cindy Wendy. Viker picked up another information sheet. He knew this person was in seclusion to train. It seemed he would only make an appearance once at the dinner party tomorrow night. Seth Baskerville, the consul of Underdog City, member of the baronial house, the second son of Hugo Baskerville. Currently, he is the second candidate for the position of clan leader. He remembered Seth Baskerville. His talent had always been overshadowed by his older brother, and he had suffered from a serious illness since childhood. His personality was different from the others in the family, gentle and kind. In his youth, he had been bullied by Hugo for being weak. He was also the only one who wept for the hunting dogs that were treated like trash, the only member of the family whom I respected. Viker's eyes brightened as he thought that if he encountered him right now, he would be talking while continuing to flip through pages. Suddenly, he slammed the information down on the table. He declared the rest are all unworthy of attention because I know them very well. He proclaimed loudly and confidently, all right, tomorrow's banquet will be very interesting. At that moment, he stepped toward a door plated in bronze, guarded by security on either side. The door slowly opened, revealing his silhouette. He looked closely inside where a banquet table was set before him. The official feast was about to begin. Viker van Baskerville arrived to attend the banquet at the request of the clan leader. Everyone at the dining table looked at him with excitement, anticipation, and eagerness. He placed his hand on his chest, bowed his head, and said, thank you for inviting me. Hugo de Baskerville looked at him and said, sit down in your place, my son. In the lavish, opulent room, the chandelier sparkled with bright candles. The sound of silverware clinking rang out, and then someone cleared their throat. A man with a rather fierce demeanor spoke up, it seems the meat isn't cooked yet, right? The man with dark glasses who looked intimidating was the leader of the Pimple and Boston Terrier pack. Upon hearing this, the head of the Baskerville family asked, is the meat not to your taste? He chuckled and replied, oh, it's not that, brother. I'm talking about the meat on the plate next to it. The man next to him, with platinum hair, paused his meal prep upon hearing that. He glanced at him and said, do you have something to say to me? Captain of the Mastiff team. Great Dane Baskerville replied, no, I was just trying to point out that your piece of meat doesn't seem fully cooked. The man, with red eyes behind dark glasses, looked at Great Dane and continued, if I let my precious nephew eat raw meat, that would be quite cruel. The kid is really adorable. But still, he's my nephew, and as an uncle, I know what's best to guide him on the right path. Hearing this, he immediately asked, so, you think letting him join the Mastiff team is the right path you're talking about? He responded, it's certainly better than joining a team as foolish and slow as the Pimple. The man sitting across understood the situation. They called him here to compete for him to join their team. One of the 7 teams representing Baskerville, both the Pimple and Mastiff teams had extended invitations. If this were before, he would have been thrilled to be acknowledged, but now he just considered them fools. At that moment, Hugo Le Baskerville seemed to grasp the issue and huffed lightly. The butler beside him noticed this and spoke up. It seems the patriarch is in a good mood. Perhaps seeing his distant relatives show concern for the young master has brought him some joy. He looked at the butler, assessing him silently. The head butler always seemed to explain things in a positive light. Hugo was just enjoying watching his two younger siblings squabble with each other. While Boston Terrier Le Baskerville and Great Dane Le Baskerville were arguing, the butler turned to him and said, "So, what do you think? You've spent the last 2 years living in the Reborn Mountains. How many barbarians and monsters have you taken down? Why not share some of your experiences with your uncle?" Great Dane Le Baskerville chimed in, "I'm curious too. I wonder what my dear nephew has faced in that dangerous forest. But honestly, I'm even more interested in how the boy has grown." At that moment, his father spoke up. "Let the boy eat first. Don't bother him too much." Hearing this, Great Dane Le Baskerville replied, "Brother, aren't you curious? I can't help my curiosity, which is why I rushed back." Hugo Le Baskerville interjected sharply, "Stop." Both of his younger siblings were startled at the outburst. He looked quite angry as he said, "You both know, I don't like to repeat myself." Both of them, hearing this, responded fearfully, "I'm sorry." At that moment, he stood up and spoke, "It's not difficult to list the achievements I've made." Hugo Le Baskerville, noticing him rise, asked, "Son, you've had quite a long trip. Aren't you tired after heading to the gym?" He replied, "I'm still good, father. Skills can be shown anytime and anywhere." As he spoke, he tapped a finger lightly on the table, saying, "Don't we all need to practice every day?" He then looked at Mr. Boston Terrier Le Baskerville and remarked, "It seems like you've poured too much wine into your glass, and Mr. Great Dane's steak is still a bit undercooked." After saying that, he gently performed a simple gesture. A source of red energy radiated from the tip of his finger, and then that energy shot toward the two food items he had mentioned. The steak, which was still slightly rare, was now perfectly cooked and steaming hot. The glass of wine was bubbling and boiling as well. At that moment, he pierced the steak with his fork, then gasped in surprise. Terrier, holding his now half-empty glass of wine, was delighted and excited, laughing out loud, "Ha ha! Just by placing my hand on the table, I can use mana to cook the meat and warm the wine." They were so amazed that they shouted, "A kid only 17 years old can achieve the level of a mid-ranked graduator. Just think, by the time he's 37, how much more will he have developed?" At that moment, Hugo Le Baskerville, who had been sipping his wine slowly, also came up in conversation. "You should be proud, brother. Your son has mastered all those skills.